Millionaire sees 8-year-old twin girls crying at his wife's grave. What one says, "Mommy is still alive," reveals a shocking truth. Just before we begin, your presence means a lot. Say hi and share where you're tuning in from only if you want to. The autumn wind whispered through the cemetery's ancient oaks, scattering golden leaves across the quiet pathways. Jackson Hayes pulled his cashmere coat tighter around his broad shoulders as he approached the marble headstone that had become his annual pilgrimage. 10 years as a tech billionaire had hardened him against most emotions. But this day, the anniversary of Eleanor Porter's death, always stripped away his carefully constructed armor. He placed a single white rose on the cold stone, his fingers lingering on the engraved name, Eleanor Porter. 1989-2017. Beloved mother and daughter. His throat tightened as memories flooded back. Her laugh, her brilliance, the way she challenged him when no one else dared. "Another year without answers," he whispered, the words carried away by the wind. Soft sound caught his attention, a whimper barely audible over the rustling leaves. Jackson turned, his steel blue eyes scanning the cemetery until they landed on two small figures huddled beside Eleanor's grave. Two little girls, mirror images of each other with golden curls and tear-stained cheeks, knelt on the damp ground. They couldn't have been more than 8 years old, dressed in matching blue coats that had seen better days. "Mommy's still alive, I know she is," one of them whispered fiercely, her small hand tracing the letters on the headstone. Jackson froze. The words struck him like physical blows. Eleanor had children? Twins? His mind raced, calculating timelines and possibilities. "Emma," the social worker said, "we have to accept it," the other girl said, her voice breaking. "But I don't want to." "They're wrong, Olivia. I feel her. I still feel her." Jackson approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them. "Hello there," he said gently. The girls jerked their heads up, eyes wide with momentary fear that quickly gave way to curiosity. Something about their faces, the shape of their eyes, the determined set of their jaws, struck him with uncomfortable familiarity. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he continued. "I knew Eleanor." The girls exchanged a glance loaded with meaning, a silent communication that only twins could master. "You knew our mom?" asked the one called Emma, her voice suddenly sharp with hope. Jackson nodded, kneeling down to their level despite the expensive fabric of his tailored suit pressing against the damp ground. "I did, a long time ago." "No one believes us," Olivia said suddenly, her small hands clenched into fists. "No one believes that she's still out there." Emma's eyes, startlingly intelligent, studied Jackson's face. "Why do you come here? Everyone else has forgotten her." The question pierced through Jackson's carefully constructed defenses. Why did he come year after year? Eleanor had vanished from his life long before her reported death. Their relationship had burned bright and ended, abruptly, leaving only ashes and questions. "I could never forget your mother," he answered truthfully. The girls looked at each other again, that silent twin communication passing between them. "Why does nobody believe us?" Emma asked, her voice small yet defiant. Something inexplicable pulled at Jackson's heart, a connection he couldn't explain, a responsibility he hadn't sought. These children, with their unwavering faith and fierce determination, reminded him of someone. Of Eleanor. Of himself, before success had calcified his heart. "I'll believe you," he heard himself say, the words surprising him as much as the girls. "Tell me why you think your mother is still alive." Their faces transformed with matching expressions of hope, the first ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in Jackson Hayes' world. He didn't understand why these children's pain resonated so deeply within him, why their conviction stirred something long dormant in his soul. "You will?" Olivia whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jackson nodded, an unspoken promise forming. "I will. I want to hear everything." Behind them, a woman in a sensible coat approached with concern etched on her face. "Girls, you can't just run off like that." "I'm so sorry, sir, if they've bothered you." but Jackson barely heard her. His eyes remained fixed on the twins' faces, a strange sensation washing over him, like pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed suddenly revealing. Their edges. They're not bothering me at all, he said firmly. In fact, I think we have a lot to talk about. How many characters would you like for the next chapter? Jackson led the small group to a quiet cafe across from the cemetery. The establishment's warm lighting contrasted sharply with the gray afternoon outside. The woman who had approached them, Martha Wilson, introduced herself as the twins' temporary guardian. I work with family services, she explained quietly while the girls sat at a nearby table, heads bent together in whispered conversation. They've been through so much since Eleanor's accident last year. The foster system is challenging for them. Jackson nodded, his eyes never leaving the twins. How did you know Eleanor? I didn't personally. I was assigned to their case after. Martha hesitated. Emma and Olivia are special children. Brilliant, like their mother apparently was, but they cling to this belief that she's still alive. The therapist says it's their way of coping. A waitress brought hot chocolates for the girls and coffee for the adults. Jackson approached the twins' table, sitting down across from them. Tell me about your mother, he said gently. Emma, the more analytical of the two, studied him with eyes too wise for her age. Mom was a scientist. She worked with medicines to help sick people. She was always writing in her special notebook, Olivia added, the one with the lock that had all her secrets. Emma nodded. Before the accident, she was acting weird, scared. She kept saying some people were dangerous. She'd whisper on the phone at night, Olivia continued. We weren't supposed to hear, but we did. Jackson leaned forward. What did she say? That she found something bad. That people could get hurt, Emma replied. She said she had proof and needed to tell someone important. Martha sighed. The police investigated thoroughly after the car accident. There was nothing suspicious. Because they didn't look, Olivia protested. Mom left us clues. She knew something might happen. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. This was in her special box. She said if anything happened to her, we should remember this picture. Jackson took the photo and his heart stopped. It showed a younger Eleanor laughing on a university campus, her arm around a younger version of himself. He remembered that day perfectly. It was taken 10 years ago, during their final semester together at MIT. That's you, Emma said simply. Jackson couldn't speak, staring at the evidence of a past he'd tried to forget. Martha looked confused. You knew Eleanor well? We were together in college, Jackson managed to say, his mind racing. But we lost touch years ago. Mom never told us much about our dad, Olivia said softly. Just that he was someone important, too important to be part of our lives. Jackson studied their faces more carefully now. The shape of their eyes, the determined set of their chins, the analytical gaze. Traits he saw every morning in the mirror. Traits his mother had passed to him. The realization hit him with stunning clarity. These weren't just Eleanor's daughters, they were his. The drive to Jackson's penthouse was silent, his mind a tempest of calculations and memories. 10 years ago, Eleanor had vanished from his life without explanation. 9 years ago, these girls were born. The timeline fit perfectly. In his spacious living room overlooking the city skyline, Jackson paced while Martha made phone calls to approve the girls' temporary visit. Emma and Olivia sat wide-eyed on his leather sofa, looking impossibly small against the backdrop of modern luxury. Your home is bigger than our whole apartment building, Olivia whispered. Jackson stopped pacing. I didn't always live like this. When did you know our mom? Emma asked, her analytical mind clearly making connections. Jackson sat across from them, choosing his words carefully. We met at college, MIT. We were both studying technology, though your mother was more interested in biomedical applications. That's where she became a scientist. Olivia nodded. She was brilliant, Jackson continued, memories washing over him. far smarter than I was. Everyone knew she'd change the world someday. What happened between you? Emma's question was direct, unflinching. Jackson's jaw tightened. We were together for almost 3 years. Then one day she was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. I tried to find her, but she disappeared completely. He omitted the crushing devastation he'd felt, how her abandonment had hardened him, fueled his relentless drive to succeed, how he'd built his tech empire partly to prove she'd made a mistake in leaving. Did you know she worked for Bennett Pharmaceuticals? Jackson asked. Martha looked up from her paperwork. Yes, she was a senior researcher there. Dr. Maxwell Bennett himself wrote her recommendation letter after she died. The name hit Jackson like a physical blow. Maxwell Bennett, his former mentor turned bitter rival. The man who had taken him under his wing at MIT, then subtly tried to control his career path. The same man who had always seemed unnervingly interested in Eleanor's research. Bennett, Jackson whispered, pieces clicking into place. He remembered Bennett's frequent comments about Eleanor being a distraction from Jackson's potential. How Bennett had offered Jackson funding for his first startup immediately after Eleanor disappeared. The timing he'd never questioned, because he'd been too consumed by heartbreak and ambition. I need to see Eleanor's research, Jackson said suddenly. You mentioned a notebook? Emma nodded. It has a special lock. We couldn't open it. Where is it now? With our things at Martha's house, Olivia replied. Mom said it was important that people's lives depended on what she found. Martha's phone rang, breaking the moment. After a brief conversation, she turned to Jackson. That was my supervisor. Due to your previous connection to Eleanor, they've approved an extended visit. The girls can stay tonight if they'd like, and we'll reassess tomorrow. Jackson nodded, a strange protective feeling surging within him. I'd like that. After Martha left with promises to return with overnight bags, Jackson stood at his window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk fell. Behind him, his daughters, whispered together on the sofa. His phone vibrated with a message from an unlisted number. Heard you met Eleanor's twins today. We should talk about old times. MB. Jackson's blood ran cold. Bennett was watching. And Bennett never reached out without purpose. What had Eleanor discovered that was worth hiding? What had she died or disappeared to protect? And most importantly, why had Bennett kept him from knowing his own children? When Martha returned with the girls' belongings, Jackson noticed their meager possessions, a small suitcase each, with clothes that had seen better days. Emma clutched a worn backpack protectively against her chest. It's in here, she said once Martha had left, carefully unzipping the bag to reveal a leather-bound journal with an unusual mechanical lock. Mom's special notebook. Jackson examined. The lock, not electronic, but a complex puzzle mechanism. This is brilliant, he murmured. A lock that can't be hacked. We tried to open it, Olivia admitted. But it's too hard. Jackson reached for his phone. I know someone who might help. Within an hour, Camila Rodriguez arrived. His head of security was a former intelligence operative with skills that extended far beyond normal corporate protection. Interesting, Camila said, examining the diary. Reminds me of cryptographic mechanisms from the Cold War era. Your Eleanor was serious about keeping this private. While Camilla worked on the lock, Jackson ordered dinner and showed the twins around the penthouse. Their eyes widened at his home automation system. You make this? Emma asked, watching lights respond to voice commands. My company did. We specialize in intelligent systems that learn from human behavior. Like the robots in Mom's stories? Olivia's eyes brightened. Not quite that advanced, Jackson smiled. Not yet anyway. I've got it, Camilla called from the living room. The diary lay open on the coffee table. The first pages contained research notes, chemical formulations, and molecular diagrams beyond Jackson's expertise. But further in, Eleanor's elegant handwriting shifted to personal entries. March 12th. The Phase the 3rd. Trials data doesn't match what was submitted to the FDA. Patient deaths in the original study were recategorized under different causes. Neuralin is dangerous, but Bennett altered the reports. March 20th. Discovered cardiac abnormalities in 18% of patients, not the 2% reported. Bennett personally ordered these findings removed before submission. April 3rd. Bennett knows I've been accessing the original files. Victoria watching me constantly. Must protect the girls. If something happens, the evidence is with Diana. Jackson looked up, his face grim. Eleanor was documenting fraud. Bennett Pharmaceuticals falsified safety data for their flagship drug. That why Mom had to hide? Olivia asked. Before Jackson could answer, his security system alerted him to a visitor. On the monitor, he saw Maxwell Bennett himself standing at his private elevator. Take the girls to the guest room, Jackson told Camilla urgently. Keep them there until he's gone. Bennett entered with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to power. At 60, his silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but Jackson now recognized the calculated coldness in his eyes. Jackson, Bennett smiled without warmth. Been a while. What do you want, Maxwell? Can an old mentor check in? I hear you've taken an interest in Eleanor Porter's children. Jackson kept his expression neutral. News travels fast. Small world, Bennett replied, glancing around the penthouse. Tragic about Eleanor. Brilliant mind. Yes, she was, Jackson said carefully. Bennett's eyes sharpened. The girls are staying with you? Interesting choice by social services. Temporary arrangement. Bennett nodded slowly. Children need stability. Perhaps Bennett Pharmaceuticals could establish a trust fund for Eleanor's memory. The threat was veiled but clear. Bennett was asserting control. I'll handle their needs, Jackson said firmly. As Bennett left, he paused. Those girls have Eleanor's eyes, don't you think? But something about them reminds me of someone else. Good genes. His smile was predatory. Be careful, Jackson. Parenting can be hazardous. After the elevator doors closed, Jackson leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Bennett knew. And Bennett wanted Eleanor's research, and possibly the twins, under his control. Jackson returned to the diary, more determined than ever to uncover what Eleanor had discovered, and why it might have cost her her life. The morning after Bennett's unsettling visit, Jackson arranged for enhanced security measures. Camilla stationed 2 additional team members in the building and implemented advanced surveillance protocols. We're being watched, she informed Jackson privately. There's a black sedan that circled the block 6 times. Professional surveillance team. Jackson nodded grimly. I need to know everything about Eleanor's work at Bennett Pharmaceuticals, and I want to meet anyone who worked closely with her. While the twins explored the penthouse library with Camilla, Jackson began his investigation. In earnest, he contacted his corporate intelligence team to discreetly gather information on Bennett's operations, Eleanor's research history, and the drug Neuralin. By afternoon, Jackson was reviewing preliminary reports in his home office when Emma slipped. Inside, her observant eyes taking in the multiple screens displaying data. Are you looking for Mom's secrets? She asked. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. I am. I think your mother discovered something dangerous and some powerful people might have wanted to stop her. Emma's face remained serious. She knew they were coming. That's why she made plans. She climbed onto a chair beside Jackson. I remember watching her burn papers in the kitchen sink. She was crying. When was this? Jackson asked gently. The week before she died. She kept saying they won't hurt my girls. Emma's analytical gaze met Jackson's. She was protecting us from someone. The revelation sent a chill through Jackson. Emma, do you remember anyone unusual coming to your house? Anyone who might have been watching your mother? Emma thought carefully. A woman with red hair came to dinner once. Mom was tense. They argued after she thought we were asleep. Do you know her name? Dr. Victoria. Mom called her Vic. They used to be friends, but then Mom said she chose the wrong side. Victoria Coldwell, Bennett's research director and right hand. Jackson made a mental note to investigate her more thoroughly. An alert from his security system diverted his attention. Someone had arrived at the private elevator. The monitor showed a thin woman with anxious eyes and a lab coat tucked into her bag. Sarah Wang, she identified herself to the security camera. I was Eleanor Porter's research assistant. I need to speak with Mr. Hayes. After security cleared Sarah entered the penthouse clearly uncomfortable with the luxury surroundings. Her gaze softened when she spotted the twins reading in the living room. Emma, Olivia, she said with genuine warmth. You've grown so much. The twins rushed to embrace her, confirming her identity better than any security check could have. In Jackson's office, with the door closed, Sarah spoke in hurried, nervous tones. I shouldn't be here. They're watching all of Dr. Porter's former associates. But when I heard you'd taken the twins in, she twisted her hands anxiously. Dr. Porter talked about you, you know. Not often, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at an old photo. Why have you come, Sarah? Jackson asked directly. Because Eleanor prepared for her own death, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. The accident was too convenient, too perfectly timed. She had just compiled all the evidence of data manipulation on Neuralin trials. Sarah pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Eleanor gave me this the day before she died, said it was her life insurance. I was supposed to release it if anything happened to her, but I was too afraid. Bennett has connections everywhere, police, FDA, media. Jackson took the drive, his expression grave. What does it contain? Raw data from the original trials. Patient records showing cardiac failures systematically recoded as unrelated complications. Internal emails ordering the manipulation of data. Bennett personally directing which adverse events should be hidden. Why didn't she go public? Jackson asked. Sarah's eyes darted to the door. She was going to. Had a meeting scheduled with an investigative reporter. But she was also terrified. For the twins, she lowered her voice further. Bennett made threats, not directly but through Victoria, said that single mothers could face unfortunate accidents, leaving their children in the system. Jackson's jaw tightened. So she was gathering evidence carefully, building an airtight case. Yes, Sarah confirmed, and there's more. Neuralin was just the beginning. They're preparing to launch a pediatric version despite knowing the risks are even higher for children. The implication was staggering. Thousands of children could be endangered by a medication known to be unsafe. There's one more thing, Sarah continued. In those final weeks, Eleanor kept saying she had a nuclear option if anything happened to her. Something that would destroy Bennett completely. She never told me what it was, but it gave her courage. Jackson thought of the diary, still only partially decoded. Did she have any unusual research sites? Private labs, off-site locations? Sarah hesitated. She sometimes disappeared for entire weekends. Said she was conducting independent verification of her findings. I always assumed she was using university labs where she had former colleagues. Before leaving, Sarah knelt to hug the twins once more. Your mother was the bravest person I've ever known, she told them. She would move mountains to protect you. After she departed, Jackson found the twins sitting unusually quiet in the living room. Sarah looked scared, Olivia observed. Like Mom did at the end. We'll protect Sarah, Jackson promised, and we'll find out what happened to your mother. That night after the twins were asleep, Jackson reviewed the flash drive's contents with Camilla. The evidence was damning. Systematic fraud that had potentially cost hundreds of lives. This would destroy Bennett Pharmaceuticals, Camilla said. Their stock would collapse overnight. And Bennett himself would face criminal charges, Jackson added. No wonder he was willing to go to such lengths to suppress it. He stared at the sleeping faces of his daughters, their existence a miracle he was still processing. Their mother had faced down one of the most powerful men in pharmaceuticals to protect patients and them. Had it cost Eleanor her life? Or was she still out there somewhere, as the twins so fervently believed? Jackson made a silent vow as he watched over them. He would finish what Eleanor started. He would protect their daughters. And he would uncover the full truth, no matter how dangerous the path. The headquarters of Bennett Pharmaceuticals rose like a gleaming monolith above the city skyline, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Jackson studied it from across the street. remembering how he'd once admired the building as a symbol of scientific progress. Now he saw it differently, a fortress hiding corruption. Inside his car, he reviewed his strategy. With the twins safely at his penthouse under Camilla's protection, he could focus on infiltrating Bennett's operation. His cover was simple: a potential investor interested in the upcoming pediatric Neuralin launch. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Hayes, what an unexpected pleasure. Dr. Bennett didn't mention you were visiting today." A spur-of-the-moment decision. Jackson smiled disarmingly. "Is he available?" Bennett wasn't, but his second-in-command was. Victoria Coldwell greeted Jackson with professional courtesy that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "What brings a tech billionaire to our humble pharmaceutical company?" she asked, leading him through the research wing. "Looking to diversify?" "Something like that," Jackson replied. "I'm particularly interested in Neuralin. I hear the pediatric version is nearly ready for market." Victoria's smile tightened slightly. "Our most promising development. Trials have been extraordinarily successful, so I've heard. Though some might say suspiciously so." Jackson watched her reaction carefully. A flash of tension crossed her face before she recovered. "Science often delivers unexpected breakthroughs, Mr. Hayes." She showed him laboratories where white-coated researchers worked with precision instruments. Everything appeared immaculate, transparent, but Jackson noticed the keycard barriers, the surveillance cameras, the restricted areas. "I'd love to see the raw data from the pediatric trials," he mentioned casually. "My team performs independent analysis before any investment." "Of course," Victoria nodded. "Though it would require confidentiality agreements, proprietary methods, you understand." They passed a restricted laboratory where researchers huddled around screens displaying molecular structures. Jackson glimpsed the label Neuralin P before Victoria smoothly directed him away. As they approached a conference room, Jackson heard Bennett's unmistakable voice from inside. "I don't care what it takes. Hayes is becoming a problem just like Porter was. Find out what he knows." Victoria cleared her throat loudly before opening the door, giving Bennett just enough warning to compose himself. "Jackson," Bennett exclaimed with false warmth. "Victoria didn't tell me you were visiting. What a pleasant surprise." The conference room contained 3 other executives who watched Jackson warily. On the screen behind them, Jackson glimpsed financial projections for Neuralin P, $4.2 billion in first-year revenue. "Just exploring some investment opportunities," Jackson said smoothly. Bennett's smile remained fixed. "Always the entrepreneur. Though I'm surprised you're interested in pharmaceuticals. Quite different from your tech empire." "I go where the opportunities are," Jackson replied. "Though I believe in thorough due diligence. Safety profiles. Proper testing procedures." Something dangerous flickered in Bennett's eyes. "Our safety standards are impeccable, perhaps beyond what a tech executive would understand." The threat remained unspoken, but clear throughout their conversation. When Jackson departed, Bennett walked him to the elevator. "Curious timing for your interest in my company," Bennett remarked. "Right after taking in Eleanor's twins. Quite the coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences," Jackson replied evenly. Bennett's mask slipped momentarily. "Neither do I. Some questions are better left unexplored, Jackson, for everyone's benefit." As the elevator doors closed, Jackson heard Bennett's final words. "Remember, children need stability. It would be tragic if anything disrupted that." Outside, Jackson noticed the security team photographing his departure. His phone buzzed with a message from Camilla. "You need to see this. Found financial records. Bennett made 6 payments to the driver who hit Eleanor's car." Jackson's resolve hardened. Eleanor's accident had been no accident at all. "I don't talk to billionaires," Diana Chen declared, barely looking up from her laptop at the corner table of the busy coffee shop, especially ones with ties to Big Pharma. Jackson sat down uninvited. "I don't have ties to Bennett Pharmaceuticals, but Eleanor Porter did, and she was trying to contact you before she died." The investigative reporter's fingers paused over her keyboard, her expression betraying nothing. "Eleanor Porter, the scientist who died in a car accident last year." The scientist who discovered Bennett was hiding deadly side effects of Neuralin, Jackson corrected. The scientist who had scheduled a meeting with you the day after her supposed accident. Diana closed her laptop. Alleged accident. And how would you know about any meeting? Instead of answering, Jackson placed a flash drive on the table. Raw data from the original Neuralin trials. Patient deaths systematically recategorized. Internal emails ordering the concealment of adverse effects. And financial records showing payments to the driver who hit Eleanor's car. Diana didn't touch the drive. Why bring this to me? You have enough resources to buy a media company if you wanted to publish this. Because Eleanor trusted you, and because Bennett has connections in traditional media channels that might suppress the story. Jackson leaned forward. Also, I believe you already have part of what Eleanor was gathering. Diana's carefully neutral expression confirmed his suspicion. What's your stake in this, Hayes? You build AI systems, why care about a pharmaceutical scandal? Jackson hesitated, then decided on the truth. Eleanor Porter's twin daughters are mine. I didn't know they existed until 3 days ago. Diana studied him with new interest. That changes things. But if what you're implying is true, that Bennett orchestrated her death, then you've put those girls in danger by taking them in. They were already in danger, Jackson replied, and I need to know if their mother is truly dead. You think she's alive? Diana asked incredulously. The twins believe it. And I've discovered her body was never properly identified. The accident left it supposedly unrecognizable, and the medical examiner was pressured to expedite the process. Jackson pulled out his phone, showing her crime scene photos he'd obtained. The car was completely incinerated. Forensics shows accelerants were used. It wasn't an accident, it was staged. Diana was fully engaged now. You need Detective Marcus Lewis. He was lead investigator initially, but got pulled off the case when he raised questions about inconsistencies. Can you arrange a meeting? Diana nodded slowly. I'll contact him. But if we do this, we do it my way. No corporate cover-ups, no settling quietly, no matter how ugly it gets. That's exactly what I want, Jackson assured her. The full truth, publicly exposed. Later that evening, Jackson found Emma sitting alone in the penthouse library, studying Eleanor's diary with intense concentration. Any breakthroughs? He asked gently. She looked up with eyes so like his own. Mom used different coding systems for different sections. This part talks about the White Room where she did special research. Emma pointed to a diagram. I think it's not in the main building. Jackson sat beside her, impressed by her analytical mind. You're very good at puzzles. Mom taught us. She said sometimes the most important things have to be hidden in plain sight. Emma hesitated. She also said if anything happened to her, we should find the man in the photograph. Me? Jackson asked softly. Emma nodded. She kept your picture in her special box, the one with important things. She looked at him directly. Were you our dad? Is that why she kept your picture? The directness of her question caught Jackson off guard. Before he could answer, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Emma, that was supposed to be a secret until we were sure, she exclaimed. Jackson looked between his daughters, his heart constricting. Yes, he said simply. I believe I am your father. I just didn't know it until now. Why didn't you find us before? Olivia asked, her voice small. Because I didn't know about you, Jackson answered truthfully. If I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your lives. The three sat in momentary silence, the weight of what might have been hanging between them. We should find Mom together, Emma finally said. As a family, Central Park stretched before them in autumn glory, a mosaic of red and gold beneath a crisp blue sky. Jackson watched Emma and Olivia race ahead on the path, their identical blue coats fluttering behind them like wings. He'd insisted on buying them new clothes, though they'd protested they didn't need fancy things. 3 days into their unexpected cohabitation, Jackson was still adjusting to fatherhood. The twins had a routine they'd established in foster care. Emma always tied both their shoelaces. Olivia always poured their juice. They communicated in half-sentences and knowing glances, a private language he couldn't yet decipher. "They're remarkable," said Detective Marcus Lewis, walking beside Jackson. The former lead investigator on Eleanor's case was a weathered man with observant eyes and a reputation for integrity. "Porter raised them well." "She did everything well," Jackson replied quietly. "That was Eleanor. Brilliant, thorough, uncompromising." Lewis nodded. "That's what first raised my flags about the accident. Too neat, too convenient. The fire burned hot enough to destroy DNA evidence. The brake lines were cut, but in a way that would only fail at high speed. Professional job," Jackson concluded. "Extremely. When I tried to investigate further, I was reassigned. My captain cited resource allocation, but the order came from higher up." Lewis watched the twins now feeding ducks by the pond. "Diana Chen showed me what you've gathered. It's compelling, but still circumstantial. We need something that directly connects Bennett to the orchestration of the accident." "We're working on it," Jackson assured him. "My team is tracking the financial transactions to the driver." A shrill scream interrupted their conversation. Jackson's head snapped toward the pond where Olivia had ventured onto a decorative footbridge. The wooden railing had given way, and she now dangled precariously over the water. Jackson sprinted across the grass, heart pounding. He reached the bridge in seconds, lunging forward to grasp Olivia's wrist just as her grip failed. The momentum nearly pulled him in as well, but he braced himself against the remaining railing and hauled her up to safety. Olivia clung to him, shaking, her face pressed against his chest. Jackson held her tightly, the reality of how quickly he could have lost her hitting him with physical force. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." Emma crashed into them, wrapping her arms around both. "Livy, you're okay." Detective Lewis examined the broken railing, his expression grim. This wasn't wear and tear. The supports were partially sawed through. Jackson's blood ran cold. He gathered both girls closer, scanning the park for watching eyes. "We're leaving. Now." Back at the penthouse, with security doubled, Jackson sat with the twins in the living room. Olivia had recovered from her scare with remarkable resilience, though she stayed closer to him than before. "You saved me," she said matter-of-factly, like the dad in Mom's stories. "What stories?" Jackson asked. "Mom told us bedtime stories about a brave inventor who built amazing machines to help people," Emma explained. "He always saved the day, when things got scary." "She said he lived far away, building important things," Olivia added. "But someday he might come back." Jackson's throat tightened. Despite everything, Eleanor had created a hero for their daughters, not a villain. "Did she tell you anything else about him?" he asked carefully. The twins exchanged one of their communicative glances. "She said we had his eyes," Emma answered. "And his brain for puzzles." "And his stubborn chin," Olivia added with a small smile. That night, after tucking them into bed in the guest room they shared, Jackson found himself overwhelmed by emotions he'd suppressed for years. He sat in his darkened office, staring at the city lights, remembering Eleanor as she'd been in their MIT days. Brilliant, passionate, principled. The only person who'd ever truly challenged him. Had she discovered she was pregnant after leaving? Had Bennett somehow forced her away from him? The timeline fit. Their sudden breakup, Bennett's immediate offer to fund Jackson's startup, all while Eleanor disappeared completely. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway in pajamas too big for her slender frame. "Can't sleep?" Jackson asked. She shook her head, patting across the room to climb into the chair opposite his. "Olivia wants to know if you would have loved us," she said directly. "If you had known." The question pierced Jackson's carefully constructed defenses. "More than anything in this world," he answered, his voice rough with emotion. Emma studied him with those analytical eyes so like his own. "I think Mom still loves you," she said finally. "She cried sometimes looking at your picture." "I never stopped loving her," Jackson admitted, "even when I thought she'd chosen to leave." "Will you tell us about when you met her?" Emma asked. And so Jackson began the story of how he'd first encountered Eleanor Porter in an advanced robotics class, how she'd challenged his algorithm and improved it in one elegant stroke, how they'd stayed in the lab until dawn arguing theoretical approaches that would later become the foundation of his first patents. As he spoke, Olivia appeared silently in the doorway, listening. Eventually, both twins fell asleep on the large office sofa. Jackson covered them with a blanket, watching their peaceful faces. "I'll find your mother," he whispered. "Whatever it takes." Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the annual Pharmaceutical Innovation Gala, where industry elites gathered in black tie and evening gowns. Jackson adjusted his bow tie, scanning the ballroom. Diana Chen had secured him an invitation as her source for a feature on pharmaceutical philanthropy. "Bennett always makes a grand entrance halfway through," Diana murmured, elegant in a simple black dress, her press credentials displayed prominently. "He considers himself the star attraction." "And Coldwell?" Jackson asked. "His shadow." "Never. More than 10 feet away at these functions." Diana nodded toward a cluster of FDA officials. Bennett's cultivated impressive connections. 3 of those regulators previously worked for his companies. Jackson spotted the moment Bennett entered. The subtle shift in the room's energy, the deferential nods, the path clearing before him. Victoria Coldwell followed precisely 6 steps behind, resplendent in emerald silk that matched her calculating eyes. "Time to mingle," Diana said. "I'll work the regulatory crowd. You've got Bennett." Jackson circulated deliberately, positioning himself near Bennett's typical trajectory. When their paths finally crossed, he raised his champagne flute in mock salute. "Maxwell, quite the spectacle you've orchestrated." Bennett's smile remained fixed, though his eyes hardened. "Jackson, unusual to see you in pharmaceutical circles. Still playing guardian to Eleanor's girls?" "My girls," Jackson corrected, voice low enough that only Bennett could hear. A flicker of surprise crossed Bennett's face before disappearing. "Ah, you've made that connection. I wondered when you might." "You knew all along," Jackson stated. "Not a question. Eleanor was quite discreet, but pregnancy has visible symptoms." Bennett sipped his champagne. "She was brilliant but distracting you from your potential. You needed focus during those critical early startup days. So you separated us," Jackson concluded. "What did you tell her to make her leave?" Bennett's smile turned cold. "Nothing untrue. That you'd expressed frustration over her holding back your career. That you'd referenced her as a temporary diversion while discussing your 5-year plan with me." Jackson's grip tightened on his glass. "Lies. Selective truths," Bennett corrected. "She was already concerned about your workaholism, your ambition. I merely confirmed her fears. And then you hired her at Bennett Pharmaceuticals to keep her under your thumb." Bennett shrugged elegantly. "I recognized exceptional talent. When she discovered her pregnancy after leaving you, I offered security, advancement. Everyone benefited. Until she discovered what you were hiding about Neuralin," Jackson said. Bennett's expression hardened. "You're treading dangerous ground, Jackson. Eleanor made similar missteps. Accidents happen to those who don't understand their place in the ecosystem." Jackson stepped closer. "Was her death another selective truth you orchestrated?" "The official record stands," Bennett replied, coldly. "I'd be careful about spreading unfounded accusations. Think of the twins. Children need stability." His gaze drifted toward the entrance. "Speaking of which, I hear social services has questions about your sudden interest in guardianship." Before Jackson could respond, Victoria Coldwell appeared at Bennett's side, whispering urgently in his ear. Bennett's face darkened. "If you'll excuse me," he said tersely. "Urgent matter." As Bennett strode away, Diana approached with her phone displaying breaking news. "Whistleblower exposes potential fraud in Neuralin drug trials." "Sarah Wang went public," Diana said. "Limited details, but enough to spook Bennett." "He'll retaliate," Jackson warned. "We need to protect her." "Already arranged safe housing through my editor." As the gala continued, Jackson noticed Bennett and Victoria in intense conversation with several FDA officials. The network of influence was visible: handshakes, reassuring pats, confident nods. When Jackson departed shortly after midnight, he found his driver unconscious beside the car. The vehicle's brake lines had been cleanly cut. On the windshield, a handwritten note: "Not for you, for the twins' sake." The message was clear: back off, or Emma and Olivia would become targets again. Jackson's resolve hardened. Bennett had underestimated him just as he'd underestimated Eleanor. The time for careful investigation was over. He needed to strike directly at Bennett's empire before more lives were lost. Gray clouds hung heavy over Memorial Garden Cemetery, matching the somber mood of the small gathering. Jackson stood beside Detective Lewis and Diana Chen, watching, as cemetery workers prepared to exhume Eleanor Porter's grave. The court order had taken considerable legal pressure to obtain. The twins shouldn't be here for this, Jackson had insisted earlier that morning. They remained at the penthouse with Camilla, engaged in a mathematics lesson, a distraction Jackson had carefully arranged. Dr. Helena Bishop is the best forensic pathologist in the state, Lewis explained, as a petite woman in a practical raincoat approached. If there's anything to find, she'll find it. The exhumation proceeded with methodical precision. Jackson maintained his composure until workers lifted the casket from the earth. Despite his preparation, the reality of the moment, that Eleanor's remains might be inside, hit him with physical force. Dr. Bishop supervised as the casket was transported to a nearby tent for preliminary examination. The small group followed, tension thick in the air. "I'll need to document everything before opening," Bishop explained, photographing the casket from multiple angles. "The seal appears intact, no signs of previous disturbance." Jackson nodded, unable to speak. Diana squeezed his arm briefly in silent support. When Bishop finally opened the casket lid, her professional demeanor slipped momentarily. "This is unusual. Instead of human remains, the casket contained several sandbags arranged in a roughly human shape." "What the hell?" Lewis muttered, leaning closer. Bishop examined the interior carefully. "These weights approximate the body weight reported in the death certificate. There are no human remains in this casket." The implications crashed over Jackson in a wave. "She's not here." "No," Bishop confirmed, "and from the condition of these materials, I'd say this casket has never contained a body." The funeral was closed casket, Diana recalled. The official report cited severe burning from the car fire. Lewis was already on his phone requesting the original accident scene evidence. "We need to retest the blood samples from the crash site." Within hours, they gathered in Bishop's laboratory, where she completed her analysis of the original blood evidence. "It's human blood type AB negative, matching Eleanor Porter's recorded type," she confirmed. "But the quantity is inconsistent with a fatal accident. More importantly, the degradation pattern suggests it was refrigerated before being planted at the scene." "Could it have been drawn during medical treatment?" Lewis asked. "No. The preservation chemicals I'm detecting aren't used in emergency medicine." Bishop removed her glasses. "This blood was stored, likely from routine medical draws, then placed at the scene." Jackson's heart raced with the confirmation of what he'd begun to believe. "So there's no evidence she died in that crash?" "None," Bishop agreed. "In fact, I'd say there's compelling evidence that someone went to extraordinary lengths to fake her death." Back at the penthouse, Jackson found the twins waiting expectantly despite his attempts to shield them from the day's events. "You went to Mom's grave," Emma stated matter-of-factly. "Did you find her?" Jackson hesitated, then sat down at their level. "No, we didn't find her. But that might be good news." Olivia's eyes widened. "Because she wasn't there?" "Exactly." Jackson explained in simplified terms what they'd discovered. "I knew it," Olivia exclaimed, jumping up. "I told everyone she wasn't dead." Emma remained more analytical. "But where is she? Why would she hide from us?" "I don't think she's hiding from you," Jackson said gently. "I think someone is hiding her from us." Emma nodded seriously. It's the White Room. I've been dreaming about it. What White Room? Jackson asked. Where Mom is. In my dreams, she's in a room with white walls and no windows. She's working, but she looks sad. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. She writes notes and hides them inside her shoes. Jackson exchanged glances with Diana, who had been silently observing. Children's dreams weren't evidence, but given everything they'd discovered, he wasn't dismissing anything. We're going to find her, he promised. And when we do, no one will separate our family again. The press conference room at the Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with anticipation. Journalists from major outlets adjusted cameras and checked recording equipment, responding to the cryptic invitation, Groundbreaking Pharmaceutical Industry Expose, Bennett Pharmaceuticals Investigation. Behind the scenes, Jackson reviewed his presentation with Diana. Once we start this, there's no going back. Bennett will use every resource to discredit us. That's why we're doing it this way, Diana replied. Too public for them to suppress, too many outlets for them to control. Your tech background gives you credibility they can't easily dismiss. Detective Lewis entered the preparation room. Just got word. The FBI has opened a formal investigation based on the evidence we submitted. They're preparing warrants for Bennett Pharmaceutical servers. Sarah Wang sat nervously in the corner reviewing her talking points. As Eleanor's former research assistant, her testimony was crucial. Dr. Porter would be proud of this, she said quietly. This is what she wanted. The truth exposed. Patients protected. At precisely 10 a.m., Jackson stepped to the podium, camera flashes erupting around him. The tech billionaire rarely gave press conferences, ensuring maximum attention. Thank all you for coming, he began. What I'm about to share will shock many of you. It involves systematic fraud, danger to public health, and potentially orchestrated violence, all to protect corporate profits. For the next 30 minutes, Jackson methodically presented their evidence, the falsified Neuralin trial data, the concealed cardiac risks, the pattern of suspicious deaths among whistleblowers, the staged accident, and finally, the empty grave. We have conclusive forensic evidence that Eleanor Porter's death was elaborately faked, Jackson stated. We believe she is being held against her will, possibly continuing her research under duress. The room erupted with questions. Diana stepped forward, directing the press to packets containing supporting documentation and her comprehensive investigative report publishing simultaneously online. As the conference concluded, Jackson's security team reported agitated activity at Bennett Pharmaceuticals headquarters. Stock prices were already plummeting in real-time trading. Mr. Hayes, a reporter called out as Jackson prepared to leave. Is it true that Eleanor Porter's twin daughters are your children? Is this investigation personal? Jackson paused, then returned to the microphone. Yes, Emma and Olivia are my daughters. I only discovered this recently after they found me at their mother's grave. And yes, this is deeply personal. But it's also about thousands of patients endangered by a medication known to be unsafe. Back at his command center, Jackson received reports from multiple fronts. Bennett Pharmaceuticals had issued a blanket denial, calling the allegations baseless attacks from a tech competitor seeking to manipulate markets. The FBI had executed their first warrants, and most significantly, Victoria Coldwell had contacted Diana's editor, seeking immunity in exchange for information. She's breaking ranks, Diana said excitedly. This is exactly what we needed. The meeting with Coldwell took place at her attorney's office under strict confidentiality. Her composure had cracked, replaced by the nervousness of someone who recognized a sinking ship. Bennett has a research facility that doesn't appear in any official records, she revealed. Built inside a mountain property he owns personally, registered as a private retreat. That's where Eleanor is. She's alive? Jackson demanded. Coldwell nodded. Bennett couldn't risk killing her. She's the only one who fully understands the molecular structure of Neuralin and its flaws. He needs her to fix the formula without admitting the original was defective. How do we know you're telling the truth? Diana pressed. Coldwell handed over a flash drive. Security footage, access codes, facility blueprints, everything you need to find her. Why help us now? Jackson asked. Because Bennett is planning to disappear with his contingency plan, Coldwell replied grimly. Taking Eleanor to an overseas location. The transport is scheduled for tomorrow night. Once she's out of the country, you'll never find her. Jackson studied the facility blueprints while his team verified Coldwell's information. The mountain complex was sophisticated with multiple security layers and limited access points. We can't wait for the FBI's bureaucracy, he decided. By the time they get approval for this location, Bennett will have moved her. You're not suggesting, Diana began. I'm not suggesting, Jackson interrupted. I'm stating. We're going. In tonight. The FBI field office buzzed with activity as agents processed the mounting evidence against Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Special Agent Cassandra Rivera, newly assigned to lead the investigation, reviewed the case files with growing alarm. The scale of this fraud is staggering, she told Detective Lewis. We've frozen Bennett's known accounts, but he has offshore resources we can't easily touch. He's planning to transport Eleanor Porter tonight, Lewis pressed. We need to move. On that mountain facility immediately. Rivera shook her head. The warrant for that property is still working through the system. It's privately owned outside corporate holdings. Judge Morris won't sign until morning. That's not good enough, Lewis argued. By then, Porter will be gone. Outside the federal building, Jackson waited in his car, on a secure line with Camilla. Surveillance confirms increased activity at the mountain property, she reported. Multiple vehicles arriving, equipment being loaded. They're definitely preparing for transport. Jackson made his decision. Implement Alpha Protocol. We move at nightfall. Across town, Diana Chen filed her latest story, revealing Victoria Coldwell's cooperation with authorities. The headline would hit within hours. Bennett Pharmaceuticals executive turned state's evidence. Claims kidnapped scientist held in secret facility. The media firestorm was intensifying. Bennett Pharmaceuticals stock had been suspended from trading after falling 30%. Patients were flooding physicians' offices with concerns about Neuralin. The FDA had announced an emergency review. At Jackson's penthouse, he briefed his assembled team, former military specialist from his corporate security division, each selected for discretion and skill. This is not a corporate operation, he emphasized. This is a rescue mission. Our sole objective is extracting Dr. Porter safely. Martha Wilson, the twins' social worker, had arrived earlier to stay with Emma and Olivia. Jackson found them in the library, heads bent over Eleanor's diary. We decoded more symbols, Emma announced. These coordinates match the mountain Ms. Diana talked about. Jackson knelt to their level. I have to go away tonight just for a little while. You're going to find Mom, Olivia stated with certainty. I'm going to try, he confirmed. I need you both to stay here where it's safe with Martha and the security team. Emma studied him with those analytical eyes. Promise you'll bring her back. I promise to do everything in my power, Jackson answered honestly. If you find her, Olivia said, tell her we never stopped looking. As dusk fell, Maxwell Bennett paced his private office at the mountain complex, watching security feeds with growing agitation. His carefully constructed empire was unraveling by the hour. The helicopter is fueled and ready, his head of security reported. We can depart with Dr. Porter at 2200 hours. And the research data? Bennett demanded. Being compiled now. Dr. Porter is finishing the final molecular analysis. Bennett nodded tersely. Once we reach the Cayman facility, initiate the server wipe protocol here. Nothing recoverable. In the laboratory 3 levels below, Eleanor Porter worked with mechanical precision, her face thin and pale from a year, in captivity. Her hands moved expertly across sophisticated equipment, completing the refinements to the Neuralin formula that Bennett had demanded. A guard stood by the door, watching impassively. Eleanor had learned their routines over months of observation, shift changes, security patterns, moments of inattention. She had been waiting, planning, ever since she'd seen Jackson's face on a news broadcast 3 days earlier. Something about the twins. Something that had given her the first spark of hope in a year. She carefully removed a tiny sample of the corrected formula. concealing it in a capsule she'd prepared weeks ago. Whatever happened tonight, this evidence would survive. On the mountainside, Jackson's team approached under cover of darkness. Their thermal imaging identified 22 security personnel patrolling the perimeter. The facility entrance resembled a luxury mountain home, its reinforced doors disguised with architectural elegance. "Security system is military grade," Camilla reported through their encrypted comms. "I'm accessing the bypass codes Coldwell provided now." The first alarm was silenced before it triggered. The outer doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. The team entered swiftly, neutralizing 2 guards with non-lethal tactics. "Splitly takes teams 3 and 4 to secure the helicopter pad and vehicle bay," Jackson ordered. "No one leaves this facility." They descended through the complex, encountering sporadic resistance. Most security personnel surrendered when faced with superior numbers and the realization that their employer's protection was evaporating. 3 levels down, they reached the research wing. Through reinforced glass, Jackson finally saw her, Eleanor, thin and tired but unmistakably alive, working at a laboratory station. His heart slammed against his ribs at the sight. When their team breached the laboratory doors, the guard reached for his weapon but quickly surrendered when outmanned. Eleanor looked up, shock replacing her clinical concentration. "Jackson?" Her voice was barely audible, disbelief etched on her features. "Eleanor." He crossed the room in 3 strides. "We need to get you out of here. Now." She stared at him as if seeing a ghost. "Is this another of Bennett's manipulations?" "No," Jackson said firmly. "It's a rescue. Your daughters led me to you." "Emma and Olivia?" Tears filled her eyes. "They're safe?" "They're safe. They never believed you were dead." Jackson reached for her hand. "They sent me to find you." Eleanor's composure finally broke. She grabbed a small case from beneath her workstation. "We have to take this. Proof of what Bennett did. The corrected formula that shows he knew the original was flawed." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. "Perimeter breach," came Camilla's voice through comms. "Additional hostiles approaching. Looks like Bennett's private security contractors." "FBI just arrived too," reported another team member. "They're engaging the new hostiles." "Status on Bennett?" Jackson demanded. "Located on the helipad level. Attempting extraction." Jackson led Eleanor toward the exit, their team maintaining protective formation. The sounds of conflict echoed through the corridors, Bennett's arriving reinforcements clashing with both Jackson's team and the FBI agents who had arrived after obtaining their emergency warrant. They reached the upper level to find chaos, FBI, agents securing the facility, Bennett's security team members being detained, and Maxwell Bennett himself in handcuffs, his face contorted with fury as he was led to a federal vehicle. "This is a misunderstanding," Bennett was insisting to the stone-faced agents. "Dr. Porter has been working here voluntarily on classified research." When Bennett spotted Eleanor emerging with Jackson, his facade cracked completely. "You ungrateful bitch, I made you. I protected your research." Eleanor approached him with quiet dignity. "You falsified data and endangered thousands of patients. You separated me from my children. There's nothing you can say that matters anymore." Special Agent Rivera intercepted them. "Dr. Porter, we need to get you medical attention and take your statement." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "But first I need to see my daughters." Dawn was breaking as they reached Jackson's penthouse. Eleanor had been examined by medical personnel, given preliminary clearance, and provided an initial statement to the FBI. The full debriefing would wait. Rivera had understood the priority of reuniting the family. The elevator doors opened to reveal Emma and Olivia waiting in their pajamas, Martha standing anxiously behind them. For a moment everyone froze in a tableau of disbelief. "Mom," Olivia whispered. Eleanor dropped to her knees, arms outstretched. "My babies." The twins crashed into her embrace with sobs of joy, the 3 clinging to each other as if afraid they might be separated again. Jackson stood back, his own vision blurring with tears as he watched them reunite. "We knew you weren't gone," Emma said fiercely. "We found your clues." "And we found Dad," Olivia added, reaching a hand toward Jackson. Eleanor looked up at him over the girls' heads, questions in her eyes. Jackson nodded gently, confirming what she'd clearly guessed from Olivia's words. They had much to discuss, years of manipulation and deception to unravel. But for now, this moment was enough. Their family, impossibly reunited against all odds. Martha discreetly wiped her eyes. "I'll make some breakfast," she murmured, giving the family space. The sun rose over the city skyline, illuminating the penthouse in golden light. Outside, news helicopters circled Bennett Pharmaceuticals' headquarters as federal agents continued their raid. Justice was in motion. Truth was emerging from darkness. And in a quiet moment amid the chaos, a family that had been fractured by greed and power found its way back together, guided by the unwavering belief of two small girls who had refused to accept the lie they'd been told. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of medical examinations, FBI debriefings, and media frenzy. Eleanor's miraculous return dominated headlines across the nation, her story of captivity and forced research generating public outrage. Bennett Pharmaceuticals stock was suspended indefinitely as investigations expanded to include international regulatory agencies. Through it all, Jackson ensured Eleanor and the twins remained protected in his penthouse, shielding them from the media circus. Private physicians monitored Eleanor's recovery, while specialized trauma counselors helped the family begin the healing process. On the third evening after the rescue, Jackson found Eleanor alone on the terrace, watching the sunset over the city skyline. Her slender frame seemed fragile in the fading light, but her eyes held the same fierce intelligence he remembered. "The girls finally fell asleep," he said, joining her by the railing. "They've been fighting it, afraid you might disappear again." Eleanor nodded, her gaze distant. "I've been afraid of the same thing, that I'll wake up back in that laboratory." "You're safe now," Jackson assured her. "Bennett's bail was denied. The evidence is overwhelming." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and separated years hanging between them. "Jackson," Eleanor finally said, turning to face him, "I never would have kept the twins from you if I'd had a choice. You need to know that." "I'm beginning to understand," he replied carefully. "Victoria Coldwell has been cooperating extensively. She confirmed that Bennett orchestrated our separation, threatened you when you discovered you were pregnant." Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. "He showed me messages, emails, all fabricated, making it clear you didn't want family complications derailing your career. When I tried to contact you anyway, he threatened the girls directly." "And when you discovered the Neuralin fraud?" Jackson prompted gently. "He made it clear what would happen to the twins if I went public." Eleanor's voice hardened. "So I built my case secretly, created safeguards. I was so careful, but somehow he discovered my meeting with Diana." "The staged accident," Jackson concluded. Eleanor nodded. "They intercepted me after I dropped the girls at school. I woke up in the mountain facility. Bennett explained how thoroughly he'd faked my death, showed me news reports of my funeral. He said if I tried to escape, the twins would have a real funeral to attend." Jackson's hands tightened on the railing. "I should have looked for you years ago, should have questioned what happened between us." "We both believed Bennett's lies," Eleanor said softly. "He manipulated us masterfully." Inside the penthouse, Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mom? Dad? Are you still here?" They turned in unison, both moving instinctively toward their daughter. Eleanor reached her first, kneeling to embrace her. "We're both here, sweetheart. We're not going anywhere." "Olivia had a bad dream," Emma explained. "She needs you too." They found Olivia curled in her bed, tears streaking her face. When she saw them all together, she launched herself into their collective embrace. "I dreamed the bad man took Mom away again," she whispered. "No one will ever separate us again," Jackson promised, holding his family close. "We're together now." Later, after the twins had fallen back asleep, Eleanor and Jackson sat in the living room, photo albums spread before them. Martha had retrieved them from Eleanor's sealed apartment. "They're so much like you," Eleanor said, tracing a picture of the twins building an elaborate block structure. Emma's analytical mind, Olivia's determination. "They have your brilliance," Jackson countered, "and your courage." Eleanor paused at a photo of herself pregnant, standing by a window with hands protectively over her belly. "I wanted to tell you so many times, even wrote letters I never sent." "We can't recover those years," Jackson said gently, "but we can move forward." "As what?" Eleanor asked, the question that had hovered unspoken between them. "As a family," Jackson answered simply, "whatever form that takes." In the quiet nighttime hours, they began rebuilding the trust that Bennett had systematically destroyed between them, one honest conversation at a time. 3 weeks after Eleanor's rescue, Jackson stood on the porch of a seaside cottage watching Emma and Olivia race along the shoreline. Their laughter carried on the salt breeze, a sound that still caused his heart to swell with wonder. They were his daughters, a miracle he was only beginning to fully comprehend. The beachfront property in a quiet coastal town was far from the calm city's chaos. Jackson had purchased it within days of Eleanor's return, recognizing their need for privacy and healing away from media scrutiny and painful memories. The trial preparations against Maxwell Bennett dominated national headlines. His empire was crumbling as investigations uncovered decades of fraud across multiple medications. Former employees came forward daily with new allegations. The FBI had frozen his assets worldwide. Justice was progressing, but recovery was a more delicate process. "They look happy," Eleanor said, joining Jackson on the porch. Her color had improved with each passing day, strength returning to her frame, though shadows still lingered in her eyes at unexpected moments. "They are resilient," Jackson replied. "Like their mother." Eleanor smiled faintly. "And stubborn like their father." Inside the cottage, their legal teams had departed after finalizing paperwork, establishing a foundation to support victims of pharmaceutical fraud. Eleanor's corrected Neuralin formula would be made available to all manufacturers, potentially saving thousands of lives. "Diana called," Eleanor mentioned. "Her expose on Bennett's broader corruption has been nominated for a Pulitzer." Jackson nodded. "She deserves it. Without her, we might never have found you." They watched the twins building an elaborate sandcastle, their coordination seamless, communicating through glances and half-words in their private twin language. "They need stability now," Eleanor said quietly. "After everything they've been through." "What do you need, Eleanor?" Jackson asked, the question they'd been carefully navigating for weeks. She turned to face him, her expression both vulnerable and resolute. "Honesty. No more secrets between us. Bennett exploited our weaknesses because we weren't transparent with each other." "I was obsessed with success," Jackson acknowledged. "Building my company consumed me. I can see why you believed I wouldn't want the complication of family." "And I was too proud to demand answers," Eleanor countered. "Too quick to accept that you'd moved on without me." Their hands found each other's on the porch railing, the contact tentative but intentional. "The twins want us to be a family," Eleanor continued. "They've been dropping hints about sharing a home permanently." Jackson smiled. "Subtle ones, like Olivia asking if I'll be their real dad forever, and Emma designing bedroom layouts for all of us?" Eleanor laughed softly. "They get their directness from you." "What do you want, Eleanor?" Jackson asked, his voice gentle but serious. She considered the question, watching their daughters by the shoreline. "I want to rebuild what Bennett stole from us, not necessarily returning to the past, but creating something new, something honest." "Co-parenting? Friendship?" Jackson pressed carefully. Eleanor met his gaze directly. "I think we both know there's still more between us than that." Before Jackson could respond, the twins came racing up the beach path, faces flushed with excitement. "Dad, Mom, come see our castle," Olivia called. "It has a moat with real water." "And a laboratory wing," Emma added seriously. "For Mom's research." And a computer room for Dad's inventions, Olivia finished. Jackson and Eleanor exchanged glances, both recognizing the not-so-subtle symbolism of their daughter's creation. "We're coming," Eleanor called back, her fingers still entwined with Jackson's. That evening, after the twins were asleep in their new rooms filled with books and toys, Eleanor and Jackson sat on the porch swing, a comfortable silence between them. "I filed the paperwork to legally establish paternity," Jackson said, "if that's agreeable to you." Eleanor nodded. "The girls need that security." "And I've been thinking about your research," he continued. "The Hayes Porter Foundation will need a brilliant scientific director." "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Hayes?" Eleanor asked with a hint of her old spark. "I'm offering you a partnership," he corrected. "Equal control, shared mission." Eleanor smiled. "I accept." Under the stars, they began mapping their future, not rushing to reclaim what was lost but carefully building something stronger. Bennett had manipulated their past, but he would not define their future. 1 year later, the Hayes Porter family stood together on the same cemetery grounds where their journey had begun. The morning sunlight filtered through autumn leaves, casting dappled shadows across the now empty plot where Eleanor's headstone had once stood. "It feels strange to visit my own grave," Eleanor remarked, placing a bouquet of white roses on the grass. "Not your grave," Emma corrected firmly. "Just a place that helped us find each other." The past year had transformed them all. Eleanor had reclaimed her health and professional standing, now directing breakthrough research at the Hayes Porter Foundation. Jackson had shifted his corporate priorities, dedicating significant resources to healthcare ethics and patient advocacy. The twins had blossomed in their stable environment, their exceptional minds nurtured by both parents. "Bennett's sentencing is tomorrow," Jackson said quietly. Eleanor nodded. 15 years minimum, the prosecutor says. No possibility of early parole. "Is it enough?" Olivia asked, her young face serious beyond her years. "The important thing isn't his punishment," Eleanor explained, kneeling to her daughter's level. "It's that the truth came to light. Thousands of patients now have safer medication because of what happened." In the distance, they spotted Diana Chen approaching with Detective Lewis. The unlikely allies had become part of their extended family circle through the shared ordeal. "The Murdoch family sends their thanks," Diana told them, referencing one of many families who had lost loved ones to Neuralin's hidden side effects. "Their lawsuit settlement will cover their children's education through college. And the FDA has implemented the new clinical trial transparency protocols you recommended," Lewis added. "They're calling it the Porter Standard internally." After a moment of respectful silence at the gravesite, they moved toward their waiting cars. The cemetery visit had become a ritual, not to mourn, but to commemorate the beginning of their journey back to each other. That evening, Eleanor stood at the podium of a medical ethics conference, addressing an auditorium filled with researchers, physicians, and policymakers. "Truth in science is not a luxury. It's a necessity," she stated, her voice steady and passionate. "When we compromise data for profit, we betray the fundamental covenant between medicine and humanity." In the front row, Jackson watched with pride, the twins beside him taking careful notes in matching journals. Emma had already demonstrated remarkable aptitude for biomedical concepts, while Olivia showed natural talent for advocacy and communication. Different strengths, complementary purposes, much like their parents. Back at their seaside home later that night with the twins asleep, Eleanor and Jackson sat on their favorite porch swing, watching moonlight dance across the waves. "I filed the final paperwork today," Jackson said, taking Eleanor's hand. "The adoption is official. Emma and Olivia Hayes Porter." Eleanor smiled. "They've been practicing writing their new names for weeks." "There's one more name change I've been considering," Jackson continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Eleanor turned to face him, eyes questioning. From his pocket, Jackson produced a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious despite his wealth, but elegant in its simplicity, a deep blue sapphire that matched their daughter's eyes. "We've rebuilt our family piece by piece this year," he said softly. We've healed old wounds and created something stronger than what was broken. Eleanor's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'll make it official, Jackson replied. Not because of the girls, not because of our shared past, but because this year has shown me that what I feel for you now is even stronger than before. Eleanor took the ring, turning it gently in the moonlight. We're different people than we were 10 years ago. Better people, Jackson agreed. With clearer priorities. The girls will be impossible once they hear about this. Eleanor laughed softly. They've been plotting this outcome for months. Is that a yes? Jackson asked. Eleanor slipped the ring onto her finger. It's a yes. They sealed their promise with a kiss, the sound of waves providing gentle accompaniment to this new beginning. Inside, the house? Two small figures crept back from the window where they'd been spying, exchanging triumphant smiles. Finally, whispered Olivia. Statistically inevitable, Emma agreed with satisfaction. The twins returned to their beds, secure in the knowledge that their family, once fractured by lies, was now whole, strengthened by truth and bound together, by love that had survived the most determined efforts to destroy it. The truth, as Emma and Olivia had always known, had finally found its way into the light.
A little girl came to the job interview. The Millionaire CEO soon discovers she came in place of her mother, who is hospitalized, and he's left speechless. Before the story begins, wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you. Towering glass headquarters of Meridian Enterprises gleamed in the morning sunlight as Emma Harrison adjusted her backpack and stared up at the 50-story building. At just 7 years old, she stood barely 4 feet tall in her neatly ironed blue dress and white cardigan, her special occasion outfit that Mom had laid out the night before. "You can do this, Emma," she whispered to herself, clutching the worn leather portfolio that contained her mother's resume. Her honey-blonde pigtails bobbed as she nodded with determination. Inside the lobby, executives in tailored suits moved with purpose across polished marble floors. Emma approached the reception desk, standing on tiptoes to see over the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small but clear. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Alexander Reynolds." The receptionist, Diane according to her nameplate, looked up from her computer with a bewildered expression. "I'm sorry, sweetie, are you lost? Where are your parents?" Emma straightened her shoulders. "My mom is Rebecca Harrison. She has an interview for the project manager position." She placed the portfolio on the counter. "I'm here in her place." Diane's confusion deepened. "That's not how interviews work, honey. Your mother needs to come herself." "She can't," Emma's voice wavered slightly. "She's in the hospital. They took her last night when she couldn't breathe right. But she really needs this job." A tall man, in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, had paused nearby, his attention caught by the unusual conversation. Alexander Reynolds, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, was known throughout Chicago's business community for his ruthless efficiency and brilliant strategic mind. What he wasn't known for was changing his schedule for anyone. "Diane, what's the situation here?" His deep voice carried across the lobby. "Mr. Reynolds, this little girl says she's here for the project manager interview in place of her mother." Reynolds approached, studying Emma with piercing blue eyes. At 45, his salt-and-pepper hair and commanding presence normally intimidated seasoned executives. "A young lady, what's your name?" "Emma Harrison, sir," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "My mom taught me it's important to look people in the eyes when you speak to them." A hint of amusement flickered across Reynolds's face. "And where exactly is your mother?" "Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She has pneumonia, but the doctors say she'll be okay in a few days." Emma's small fingers unzipped the portfolio. "I brought her resume and her certificates. She stayed up all night working on her presentation before she got sick." Reynolds glanced at his watch, then back at the determined child. Against all logic and corporate protocol, he found himself intrigued. "Emma Harrison," he said, "I've conducted over 5,000 interviews in my career, but this is certainly a first." He extended his hand. "Come up to my office. Let's hear what your mother had prepared." Diane's mouth fell open as Reynolds guided Emma toward the executive elevator. "Sir?" Emma said as the doors closed. "Mom says I'm too young to drink coffee, but I know how to make it if you'd like some." For the first time in years, Alexander Reynolds laughed genuinely. He had no idea this unexpected meeting would change everything. Alexander Reynolds gestured for Emma to take a seat in the plush chair across from his expansive desk. The morning. Sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a wall of achievements and business magazine covers, featuring his stern face. "So, Emma," he said, watching as she carefully arranged her mother's portfolio on her lap, "tell me about your mother's qualifications." Emma opened the leather binder with practiced care. "Mom has been a project manager for 8 years. She worked at Westlake Solutions until they closed last month." Her small finger traced the resume. "She has a PMP certification and an MBA from Northwestern." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, impressed by the child's vocabulary. "And why does your mother want to work at Meridian?" "Because we need the health insurance," Emma answered honestly, "and because she says your company does important work that helps people." The directness of her response caught Reynolds off guard. Most candidates danced around compensation discussions with rehearsed speeches about company culture and growth opportunities. "Mom's really good at her job," Emma continued, pulling out a folder of project completion reports. "These are her success stories. She stayed up making this presentation even though she was getting sick." Reynolds flipped through the meticulously prepared materials, noting Rebecca Harrison's impressive track record. "Who's taking care of you while your mother is in the hospital?" Emma's expression faltered slightly. "Mrs. Winters from next door. Checked on me this morning, but she's really old. I can take care of myself. I make my own lunch for school." A heaviness settled in Reynolds' chest. "Where is your father?" "He left when I was a baby. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad." Emma shrugged as if discussing the weather. "It's just us, but we're a good team." Reynolds studied the child before. Him, poised, articulate, and carrying responsibilities far beyond her years. Something about her determination stirred long dormant memories. "One moment," he said, pressing his intercom. "Janet, cancel my morning meetings." His assistant's shocked voice came through the speaker. "Sir, you have the board presentation at 11. Reschedule it, and find out which doctor is treating Rebecca Harrison at Northwestern Memorial." Emma's eyes widened. "Are you going to visit my mom?" "We are," Reynolds replied, standing. "I need to meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary representative." As they rode the elevator down, Emma looked up at him curiously. "Mr. Reynolds, why are you helping us? Mom says busy, important people don't usually have time." The question pierced him unexpectedly. Why indeed? Reynolds had built his reputation on efficiency and results, not compassion. "Let's just say you've managed to do what most of my executives can't. Get my full attention." Emma smiled, revealing a missing front tooth, and slipped her small hand into his. The simple gesture of trust stunned him. Neither realized this moment would be the first step in healing wounds they didn't know they shared. Northwestern Memorial Hospital bustled with activity as Alexander Reynolds and Emma walked through the main entrance. The CEO looked starkly out of place in his bespoke suit among the medical staff in scrubs, but he moved with the same authority he commanded in boardrooms. "Room 317, the nurse at the station directed after checking her computer. "But sir, visiting hours don't start until—" Reynolds slid his business card across the counter. "I need to speak with Ms. Harrison about an urgent business matter." Emma led the way, navigating the corridors with familiar ease that troubled Reynolds. How many times had this child walked hospital halls alone? They found Rebecca Harrison propped up in bed, her chestnut hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, an IV line in her arm. Though clearly ill, her face pale and dark circles beneath. Her eyes, her resemblance to Emma was striking. "Emma?" Rebecca's voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with Mrs. Winters." Her eyes widened as she noticed Reynolds. "Oh my God, Mom! This is Mr. Reynolds. I went to your interview and he brought me to see you." Rebecca's face drained of what little color it had. "You did what?" Reynolds stepped forward. "Miss Harrison, your daughter made quite an impression. She presented your portfolio with remarkable poise." "I am so sorry." Rebecca struggled to sit up straighter, mortification evident. "Emma, we talked about this. You were supposed to call the company to reschedule, not go there yourself. But you worked so hard on your presentation," Emma protested, "and we need the job." The raw honesty silenced the room. Reynolds pulled a chair beside the bed. "Ms. Harrison, your daughter mentioned you were at Westlake until recently?" Rebecca nodded, still bewildered by the situation. "Yes, I was there for 5 years before the acquisition and downsizing. Your portfolio is impressive. Why haven't you secured a position elsewhere with your qualifications?" Rebecca glanced at Emma, hesitating. "It's complicated. Single parent, no family support system. Most employers see that as a liability. They ask if I'll miss work when Emma gets sick," she continued, her voice strengthening with frustration. "They never directly say it, but their concerns become clear. 8 interviews, 8 rejections in 2 months. Reynolds watched as Emma climbed onto the bed, instinctively checking her mother's IV line with the familiarity of someone who had done it before. "The medical bills aren't helping," Rebecca admitted quietly. "Pneumonia couldn't have come at a worse time." A memory surfaced, in Reynolds' mind, one he'd long suppressed. A woman, much like Rebecca, struggling alone, determined to provide despite overwhelming odds. "Ms. Harrison," Reynolds said, his decision already forming, "how soon can you recover?" "The doctor says I can leave tomorrow if my oxygen levels improve, but I won't be at full strength for a week. Then we'll conduct your official interview next Monday." In the meantime, he reached into his jacket, producing a business card. "Have the hospital billing department contact this number." Rebecca stared at the card. "Mr. Reynolds, I can't accept. Consider it an advance. Meridian takes care of its people." As they left, Emma whispered, "Thank you for helping my mom." Reynolds wondered why her gratitude felt more valuable than his last $1 million deal. For the next 5 days, Emma became a fixture at Meridian Enterprises. With Rebecca's reluctant permission, after Reynolds arranged for a car service and proper supervision, Emma spent her afternoons in an empty corner office near Reynolds' suite, doing homework and occasionally shadowing various departments. "Your operating margins could improve by reorganizing your supply chain," Emma announced on Wednesday afternoon, looking up from her math homework as Reynolds stopped by to check on her. He couldn't help but smile. "Is that so? And where did you learn about operating margins?" "Mom explains her work to me. She says it helps her think better when she talks it out." Emma tapped her pencil against her notebook. "Also, your receptionist Diane gives me business magazines when I get bored." Reynolds leaned against the doorframe. "Most 7-year-olds read comic books. I read those too. Batman is my favorite. Because he helps people and doesn't need superpowers." An unexpected laugh escaped him. "A pragmatist already." By Thursday, Reynolds' executive team had noticed their CEO's unusual behavior. Janet, his assistant of 15 years, observed him, checking his watch before Emma's scheduled arrival each day. "She reminds you of someone," Janet remarked, placing budget reports on his desk. Reynolds stiffened. "She's a child with remarkable potential. That's all. If you say so." Janet had been with him long enough to recognize the shadows that occasionally darkened his eyes. "The board is asking questions about your cancelled meetings. The board can direct their questions to me," he replied curtly. Later that afternoon, Reynolds found Emma in the break room, charming the marketing team with her insights on their latest campaign. "Kids at my school would like the colors more if they were brighter," she was saying as the marketing director took notes. "Miss Harrison," Reynolds interrupted, "I believe it's time for your appointment." It had become their ritual, a daily review of her mother's recovery and a discussion about what Emma had learned at Meridian that day. In his office, Emma settled into what had become her chair. "Mom's coming home tomorrow. The nurse said her lungs sound much better." "That's excellent news," Reynolds replied, sliding a chocolate milk across the desk, another part of their routine. "Will you still want to see me after Mom starts working?" "Here?" Emma asked suddenly, her eyes serious over the rim of her glass. The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I wouldn't?" Emma shrugged, looking down. "Dad didn't want to see me anymore. Sometimes people just stop wanting kids around." The simple statement struck Reynolds like a physical blow. In his 45 years, he'd faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and betrayals by trusted colleagues, yet nothing had prepared him for the disarming honesty of a 7-year-old. "Emma," he said carefully, "some people leave because of their own failings, not because of anything you did." He hadn't meant to share the photograph that day. It had remained locked in his desk drawer for nearly 2 decades. Yet something compelled him to open the drawer and remove the silver frame. "This was my daughter," he said, turning the frame toward Emma. Her name was Lily. Emma studied the photo of a smiling toddler with Reynolds's blue eyes. "Was? Where is she now?" Reynolds's voice grew distant. "She and her mother died in an accident a long time ago." "Is that why you're sad sometimes when you look at me?" The question hung in the air like crystal, fragile and perfectly clear. "Absolutely not." Victoria Sloan, Meridian's HR director, stood with arms crossed in Reynolds' office Friday morning. "I've reviewed Rebecca Harrison's application. While her qualifications are adequate, her situation presents significant liability concerns." Reynolds continued reviewing documents, his expression impassive, elaborate. "Single mother, no family support, recent medical issues," Victoria ticked off on manicured fingers. "She's missed work repeatedly at previous positions due to childcare emergencies. The statistical probability of attendance problems is high." Reynolds set down his pen. "Have you reviewed her performance evaluations?" "Yes, consistently exceeds expectations," Victoria conceded. "But that doesn't outweigh the practical concerns. We have equally qualified candidates without her. Complications." "Complications?" Reynolds' voice cooled several degrees. "An intelligent, dedicated professional who successfully manages both her career and raising a remarkably well-adjusted child strikes you as complicated." Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "Alexander, this isn't like you. The board is already questioning your judgment over this unusual interest. There are rumors. Rumors don't concern me, results do." He handed her Rebecca's portfolio. "Her project management methodology saved Westlake $3 million last year. That's the only relevant factor." Later that afternoon, James Whitfield, Reynolds' oldest friend and Meridian's CFO, closed the office door behind him. "Alex, we need to talk." Reynolds glanced up from his computer. "If this is about Rebecca Harrison—" "It is," James confirmed, settling into a chair. "But not for the reasons you think." He studied his friend's face. "This isn't just about finding a qualified project manager, is it?" Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Her qualifications speak for themselves." "I've known you for 30 years, James," said quietly. "Not since Caroline and Lily have I seen you like this." "Don't," Reynolds warned. James continued gently. "You've built walls so high that the board calls you the machine behind your back. Then this child walks in, and suddenly you're cancelling meetings and arranging hospital payments. What's your point, James?" "My point is that you need to be careful, not just professionally, but personally." James leaned forward. "If you're seeing ghosts of what might have been, that's a vulnerable place to operate from." Reynolds turned to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "Did you know Emma makes her own lunch? Has since she was 5. She checks her mother's medication schedule and knows how to navigate hospital billing departments." He shook his head. "She's 7, James." "And Lily would have been 19 this year," James said softly. The silence that followed was answer. Enough. After James left, Reynolds opened his desk drawer and retrieved the silver frame again. Caroline's laughing face looked back at him as she held 2-year-old Lily on her lap. "What would you think of my becoming involved in this situation?" he asked the photograph. "Am I seeing ghosts or an opportunity to finally do something right?" As always, the photograph offered no answers, only memories of what he'd lost and the crushing weight of how he'd failed them. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Sir, Rebecca Harrison is here. She was released from the hospital this morning and asked to see you." Reynolds carefully returned the photograph to its drawer. "Send her in." What happened next would determine whether his executive team's concerns were justified or whether something extraordinary was beginning. Rebecca Harrison stood in Reynolds' office, significantly improved from her hospital appearance, but still bearing the pallor of recent illness. She wore a simple navy blue suit, clearly her best, though several years out of current fashion. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her voice steady despite her evident nervousness, "I came to thank you personally for your kindness toward Emma and for handling the hospital bills. I'll arrange a repayment plan." "Please sit," Reynolds gestured to the chair across from him. "No repayment is necessary. Consider it an investment." Rebecca sat, her posture perfect despite her discomfort. "An investment requires returns, Mr. Reynolds. I haven't proven my value yet." "Your daughter has been quite the ambassador," he replied with unexpected warmth. "The marketing team is implementing her color suggestions, and the break room staff has added chocolate milk to the regular order." A smile briefly brightened Rebecca's tired face. "Emma has that effect on people. She's always been able to talk to anyone." Her expression grew serious. "But I need to apologize for putting you in this position." She was supposed to call and reschedule the interview, not attend it herself. "Yet here we are," Reynolds observed. "Sometimes the most significant opportunities arise from broken protocols." He studied her for a moment. "Your official interview is scheduled for Monday, but I'd like to discuss something different today." Rebecca tensed slightly. "Of course," Reynolds leaned forward. "Why do you continue pursuing corporate positions when they've repeatedly rejected you because of your family situation?" The blunt question hung in the air between them. Rebecca's eyes flashed with momentary anger, then determination. "Because I refuse to let my daughter believe that being a mother makes me less valuable professionally. Because I'm excellent at what I do, regardless of my personal circumstances." She straightened in her chair. "And frankly, because I need comprehensive health insurance more than inspirational workplace culture or ping-pong tables in the break room." Reynolds nodded slowly. "Practical priorities. I respect that." He paused, then asked, "If hired, how would you handle the inevitable emergencies, Emma's illnesses, school closures?" "The same way I've always handled them, with contingency plans and backup systems," Rebecca answered without hesitation. "I maintain relationships with 3 reliable babysitters, 2 after-school programs, and a network of other working parents for emergencies." She leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, I understand your concerns. Every employer has them. But what they fail to recognize is that single parents are the most efficient workers you'll ever find. We don't have time for office politics or extended lunches. We prioritize ruthlessly and maximize every minute because we have to." Reynolds studied her, impressed by her candor. Then he made a decision that would change Meridian's culture forever. "Ms. Harrison, I'd like to offer you the position with one significant modification to the standard package." He slid a folder across the desk. "This outlines a pilot program I'm implementing, flexible work arrangements with emergency childcare support for employees with family responsibilities." Rebecca stared at the folder. "You're creating this because of me?" "No," Reynolds said quietly. "I'm creating it because 17 years ago, my wife Caroline tried to return to work after our daughter was born. Every company she approached saw only complications, not her brilliance." He looked directly at Rebecca. "I was too absorbed in building Meridian to notice how it destroyed her." The revelation hung in the air between them. "What happened?" Rebecca asked softly. Reynolds' face darkened with old pain. "She was driving to yet another interview when a truck crossed the median. Emma reminds me of what Lily might have become." Understanding dawned in Rebecca's eyes. "That's why you helped us." "Initially, perhaps," he acknowledged, "but your daughter's determination and your qualifications stand on their own merits." He extended his hand. "The position is yours if you want it." As Rebecca shook his hand, neither could have predicted how this decision would transform not just their lives, but the lives of countless working parents at Meridian Enterprises in the years to come. 2 months after Rebecca Harrison joined Meridian Enterprises, the company's dynamics had subtly shifted. Rebecca's project management expertise quickly proved invaluable, her methodical approach streamlining operations across multiple departments. The pilot program for flexible work arrangements had expanded beyond her position, with 5 other employees now participating in what Reynolds had officially named the Family Forward Initiative. The quarterly projections show a 12% increase in productivity from participating team members. Rebecca explained during her presentation to the executive board. She stood confidently at the head of the conference table, her slides displaying clear metrics. Retention rates are up, and sick leave usage has actually decreased. Victoria Sloan, the HR director who had initially opposed Rebecca's hiring, watched with thinly veiled skepticism. 2 months is hardly enough time to determine long-term viability, she noted. What happens when the novelty wears off? That's why we're tracking weekly metrics rather than quarterly, Rebecca countered smoothly. We can identify and address issues in real time rather than discovering problems months later. Reynolds observed the exchange with satisfaction. Rebecca had proven herself not just competent but exceptional, deftly navigating corporate politics while delivering consistent results. The initiative stays, he announced, ending further debate. Rebecca, expand the program to include 15 more positions by next quarter. Later that afternoon, Reynolds found Emma in what had become her regular spot, a small desk in the corner of Rebecca's office where she worked on homework after school. The arrangement had raised eyebrows initially, but Reynolds had made it clear that children of employees were welcome in designated areas when necessary. Mr. Reynolds, Emma looked up from her science project. Mom's helping Mr. Davidson fix the supply chain problem just like I said. Reynolds smiled. So I heard. Your mother is quite impressive. She always was, Emma replied matter-of-factly. People just didn't notice before. The simple observation struck Reynolds as profoundly true. How many talented individuals had corporate America overlooked because their circumstances didn't fit the traditional mold? Emma, he said, sitting in the chair beside her desk, how would you feel about helping me with a special project? Her eyes widened with interest. What kind of project? I'm thinking about creating a space here at Meridian for children whose parents work late, sort of like a homework and activity center. What would make it a good place for kids your age, Emma? Considered this seriously. Books at different reading levels, quiet spaces and group spaces, healthy snacks, not just cookies even though cookies are the best, and maybe college students to help with homework. Reynolds pulled out his notebook and began writing. What about during school holidays? For the next hour, CEO and Child mapped out what would eventually become Meridian's renowned Bridge program, an on-site childcare and educational support system that would revolutionize work-life integration in corporate America. That evening, as Rebecca finished her work, she found Reynolds and Emma deep in conversation, surrounded by drawings and notes. Should I be concerned about this conspiracy? She asked with amusement. Mom, we're designing a kid space for Meridian, Emma exclaimed. Rebecca raised an eyebrow at Reynolds. That sounds expensive. It's an investment, he corrected. One that will pay dividends for years to come. As they walked to the elevator together, Rebecca studied Reynolds's profile. You've changed since we first met, she observed. For better or worse? Definitely better, she replied. The staff doesn't call you the machine anymore. Reynolds looked surprised. You heard about that? Office gossip travels fast, Rebecca smiled. Now they're calling you the revolutionary instead. As the elevator doors closed, Reynolds reflected that some revolutions began not with grand manifestos, but with a child's simple question. Why can't things be different? What no one at Meridian realized was that the company's transformation had attracted unwanted attention from those who preferred the status quo, and they were preparing to strike back. The quarterly board meeting began like any other, with financial reports and strategic planning updates. Alexander Reynolds sat at the head of the table, listening as James Whitfield presented the latest figures. Overall revenue is up 7% from this time last year, James reported. Particularly notable is the 22% increase in productivity from departments participating in the Family Forward initiative. Several board members nodded approvingly, but Gerald Harrington, the oldest member of the board and former CEO of Meridian, cleared his throat pointedly. While these figures are impressive, I've been hearing concerns about company culture, Harrington said, his voice carrying the weight of his 30 years with Meridian. There's a perception that we're becoming a daycare center rather than a premier financial services firm. Reynolds kept his expression neutral. Would you care to elaborate? Children in the workplace, flexible schedules, remote work options, Harrington listed. These may appeal to a certain demographic, but our core clients expect stability and tradition. Morgan Stanley isn't bringing sippy cups to client meetings. Victoria Sloan nodded in agreement. I've had several complaints from senior staff about noise and disruption. Just yesterday, a junior analyst was spotted playing catch with a child in the East Corridor. That was my daughter, Reynolds said quietly. The catch was a mathematics game I developed to help with her multiplication tables. The room fell. Silent. Alex, Harrington leaned forward, his tone softening to one of paternalistic concern. No one questions your authority to implement new programs, but there are whispers about your personal investment in the Harrison situation. People are questioning your objectivity. Reynolds felt a familiar coldness settle over him, the emotional armor he'd worn for years before Emma and Rebecca entered his life. My personal investments are irrelevant. The metrics speak for themselves, he replied evenly. If our goal is maximizing shareholder value, the initiative has proven its worth. The tension in the room eased slightly, but Reynolds knew this was merely the opening salvo in what would become a prolonged battle. After the meeting, James lingered behind. Gerald's not alone in his concerns, Alex. Victoria's been gathering ammunition, documenting every minor incident involving children on the premises, tracking any project delays from flexible workers. Let her, Reynolds replied. The data supports our position. This isn't just about data, James warned. It's about power and perception. Gerald still has significant influence with the older board members. They see these changes as a rejection of the company they built. Reynolds gathered his papers. Perhaps it's time the company they built evolved. That evening, Reynolds found himself driving to Rebecca's modest townhouse in Lincoln Park instead of heading home to his penthouse. He'd been invited for dinner, a simple thank you for his mentorship of Emma, Rebecca had insisted. The domestic scene that greeted him was a stark contrast to the corporate battlefield he'd left behind. Emma answered the door, proudly wearing an apron and announcing she'd helped make the lasagna. The small home was warm and cluttered with evidence of a life fully lived, books stacked on end tables, a science project taking up half the dining table, framed artwork clearly created by Emma's hand. Sorry about the mess, Rebecca apologized, emerging from the kitchen. We weren't expecting the science fair project to involve quite so much. Expansion. It's a volcano, Emma explained excitedly. It actually erupts. Reynolds found himself smiling genuinely. I'll be sure to stand back during the demonstration. During dinner, he found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did. The conversation flowed easily from Emma's school adventures to Rebecca's projects at work, without the careful calculation that characterized most of his interactions. You're different here, Rebecca observed after Emma had gone to finish homework. More human. Reynolds considered this. I've spent decades cultivating a specific professional persona. It becomes habit. It becomes armor, she corrected gently. I recognize it because I've worn similar protection. Single mom in corporate America. You develop a shell. Something about her perception unsettled and comforted him simultaneously. The board is pushing back against the changes, he admitted. They're using you and Emma as evidence that I've lost objectivity. Rebecca's expression tightened. I can request a transfer to another department. Distance myself from the initiative? Absolutely not, Reynolds interrupted. That would validate their criticism. We proceed as planned. What he didn't say, couldn't articulate even to himself, was how unacceptable he found the idea of Rebecca and Emma moving further from his daily orbit. Just be prepared, he warned. Corporate politics can turn vicious quickly. Rebecca's smile held unexpected steel. Mr. Reynolds, I've been a single mother for 7 years. There's nothing corporate America can throw at me that's more challenging than raising a child alone while working full-time. As he drove home later, Reynolds realized he'd shared more about the board's inner workings with Rebecca than he had with most executives. More troubling was the realization that the prospect of losing his professional reputation, something that had once been his primary concern, paled in comparison to the thought of losing the tentative connection he'd formed with Rebecca and Emma. He was still contemplating this shift when his phone rang with news that would accelerate the coming conflict beyond anyone's expectations. Mr. Reynolds, you need to see this immediately." Janet's voice carried unusual urgency as she placed a tablet on his desk the following morning. The headline from the Wall Street Journal's business section blared, "Meridian CEO's Personal Crusade, Business Innovation or Midlife Crisis." The accompanying article featured quotes from anonymous sources within Meridian, describing Reynolds' unusual attachment to a female employee and her child, and questioning whether his judgment had been compromised by unresolved personal trauma. The article specifically mentioned the Family Forward initiative, painting it as a costly distraction from Meridian's core business, driven by Reynolds' personal agenda rather than sound business strategy. "Who leaked this?" Reynolds asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Impossible to say for certain," Janet replied, "but the details about your wife and daughter, very few people have access to that information." Reynolds' phone began ringing, board members, major clients, and industry contacts all demanding explanations. By noon, Meridian's stock had dropped 3 points, and the PR department was in crisis mode. Victoria Sloan appeared at his office, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "The board has called an emergency meeting for 4 p.m. They're requesting your presence and—" She paused meaningfully. "They've specifically asked that Rebecca Harrison attend as well." "On what grounds?" Reynolds demanded. "They didn't share." "That information with me," Victoria replied with practiced innocence. "I'm simply delivering the message." After she left, Reynolds immediately called Rebecca to warn her. "I've already seen the article," she said, her voice tight. "Emma's teacher called me. Some of the parents are discussing it. It's affecting my daughter now, Alexander." The use of his first name, something she'd never done before, registered the seriousness of the situation. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I never intended—" "I know," she interrupted. "But intention doesn't matter much when my 7-year-old is hearing whispers about her mother's relationship with her boss." The implication struck him like a physical blow. "The article doesn't suggest—" "Not directly," Rebecca agreed. "But it plants the idea. You know how these things work." When they arrived separately at the emergency board meeting, the atmosphere was glacial. Gerald Harrington sat at the center of the table, flanked by Victoria and several of the more conservative board members. James Whitfield sat alone on the opposite side, his presence a silent statement of support for Reynolds. "We'll get straight to the point," Harrington began once everyone was seated. "This morning's article has caused significant damage to Meridian's reputation and shareholder value. Our phones have been ringing all day with concerned clients and investors." Reynolds remained outwardly calm. "Media speculation is hardly unprecedented. Our PR team is already addressing the inaccuracies." "The concern isn't just the media coverage," Victoria interjected smoothly. "It's the underlying issue of judgment and priorities." She turned to Rebecca. "Ms. Harrison, no one questions your professional qualifications. However, the special circumstances of your hiring and the subsequent development of company policy around your personal situation have created a perception problem." Rebecca's spine straightened. "My personal situation being that I'm a single parent, or that my daughter showed remarkable initiative in ensuring her mother didn't miss an opportunity? Which aspect exactly is problematic for Meridian's image?" Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "The issue," Harrington continued, "is the appearance of favoritism and the rapid implementation of policies that fundamentally alter our corporate culture without proper vetting." He slid a document across the table toward Reynolds. "We're proposing her temporary suspension of the Family Forward initiative pending comprehensive review and the reassignment of Ms. Harrison to the Cleveland office to eliminate any appearance of impropriety." Reynolds didn't touch the document. "Reassignment would be constructive dismissal, and you know it. Her daughter is established in school here." "We would, of course, provide relocation assistance," Victoria added. Rebecca's voice cut through the tension. "May I ask who leaked the personal information about Mr. Reynolds' family tragedy to the press?" The room fell silent. "That's not relevant to these proceedings," Harrington replied stiffly. "I disagree," Rebecca countered. "It speaks directly to the ethical standards of this board. Someone in this room used deeply personal information as a weapon in a corporate power struggle. That seems extremely relevant to how Meridian conducts business." James Whitfield leaned forward. I agree with Ms. Harrison. Before we discuss any policy changes or personnel reassignments, we should address the breach of confidentiality that precipitated this crisis. Victoria's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. We have no evidence that anyone on the board— Actually, Reynolds interrupted, we do. He nodded to Janet, who had been standing quietly by the door. She distributed copies of an email chain to each board member. This morning, IT traced the source of the leak. The information was sent from Victoria's email account to a journalist at the Wall Street Journal 3 days ago. All eyes turned to Victoria, whose face had drained of color. This is preposterous, she sputtered. My email was obviously hacked by someone who knew your authentication details and had access to confidential personnel files, Reynolds asked mildly. That seems unlikely. For the first time since the meeting began, Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. I anticipated this maneuver, though not quite so soon. The email contains metadata that confirms its authenticity and origin. Victoria, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear your office. Harrington's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't unilaterally fire an executive without board approval. Actually, I can, Reynolds corrected. Ethics violations of this magnitude fall under my direct authority as CEO, unless, of course, you were involved as well, Gerald? The older man deflated visibly. Of course not. I would never— Good, Reynolds interrupted. Then, as acting chairman, I move that we conclude this emergency meeting and reconvene tomorrow after everyone has had time to review the evidence properly. As the board members filed out, some looking shell-shocked and others secretly pleased at Victoria's downfall, Rebecca remained seated. You knew this was coming, she observed once they were alone. Reynolds nodded. I suspected Victoria would make a move eventually. She's opposed every progressive policy change for years, not just the ones involving you. Why didn't you warn me? There was hurt beneath her professional composure, because your genuine reaction was crucial. If you'd been prepared, someone might have suspected collusion. He hesitated. I am sorry about the impact on Emma, though, that I didn't anticipate. Rebecca gathered her papers. She's stronger than you think, than anyone thinks. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I believe in what you're trying to build here, a company where success doesn't require sacrificing family. It's long overdue. As she left, Reynolds realized that the corporate victory felt hollow compared to the personal trust he might have damaged. The battle had been won, but the war, both professional and personal, was far from over. 3 weeks after Victoria's dismissal, the controversy had mostly subsided. Meridian's stock had recovered. The media had moved on to fresher scandals. And the Family Forward initiative had not only continued, but expanded to include 25 positions across various departments. Rebecca's management of the program had been exemplary, with comprehensive metrics tracking both productivity and employee satisfaction. Even former skeptics on the board had begun to acknowledge the business case for the initiative, particularly as competing firms began implementing similar programs to keep pace with Meridian's innovation. Everything was proceeding smoothly until the day Gerald Harrington walked into Reynolds' office unannounced, closing the door firmly behind him. We need to talk, Alex, he said without preamble, about your future with Meridian. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. I wasn't aware my future was in question. Harrington placed a thick folder on the desk between them. The board has been conducting a review of company leadership and succession planning, standard procedure for any corporation of our size. And, Reynolds prompted, though he already sensed where this was heading, and there are concerns about your long-term vision for Meridian. The changes you've implemented recently, while well-intentioned, represent a significant departure from the company's established identity. Reynolds opened the folder to find a formal proposal for his transition to an advisory role over the next 6 months, with Harrington returning as interim CEO while a search for permanent leadership was conducted. I see, Reynolds said quietly. A carefully orchestrated coup. Harrington had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's unnecessarily dramatic, Alex. No one questions your contributions to Meridian. The company has thrived under your leadership for 15 years. But perhaps it's time for what, Gerald? A return to the policies of the past, discarding innovations that are demonstrably improving both our bottom line and our employees' lives? For balance, Harrington corrected. For ensuring that in your personal journey of healing, you don't reshape an entire corporation around your individual regrets. The words struck with precision, finding the vulnerability Reynolds had carefully concealed. My personal journey is irrelevant, he replied coldly. The metrics support every change I've implemented, Harrington sighed. Numbers aren't everything, Alex. Culture matters. Tradition matters. The expectations of our long-standing clients matter. He paused. And your relationship with the Harrison family has created complications that extend beyond metrics. I don't have a relationship with the Harrison family, Reynolds countered, though even to his own ears, the denial sounded hollow. Don't you? Harrington asked quietly. You've been photographed at the child's school events. You've had dinner at their home multiple times. You've created an entire corporate initiative that began with accommodating their specific situation. I've supported a valuable employee and recognized the potential for broader application of that support, Reynolds corrected. Any personal connection is secondary. Harrington studied him for a long moment. The board meeting is Friday at 2 p.m. You have until then to consider the transition proposal. If you fight this, Alex, it will get ugly. The press will dig deeper. Into your personal history, into your interest in the Harrisons. Do you really want Emma caught in that crossfire again? After Harrington left, Reynolds sat motionless, considering his options. He could fight. He still had allies on the board, and the performance numbers were on his side. But Harrington was right about one thing. A public battle would inevitably draw Rebecca and Emma back into the spotlight. As if summoned by his thoughts, there was a gentle knock at his door, and Emma peeked in. Mr. Reynolds, Mom said I could show you my science fair results. She bounded in, carrying a blue ribbon and photographs of her volcanic eruption experiment. For the next 15 minutes, Reynolds listened attentively as Emma explained the chemical reactions involved in her project, her face alight with enthusiasm for discovery. The corporate machinations that had occupied his morning seemed distant and somehow less consequential in the face of her uncomplicated joy. Emma, he said when she paused for breath, what would you think if I wasn't working at Meridian anymore? Her expression grew serious. Are you going to a different company? I might, he answered honestly, or I might start something new. Emma considered this carefully. Would we still see you? Mom says you're her mentor, but I think you're our friend too. The simple question crystallized the decision he'd been avoiding for weeks. His position at Meridian, the company he'd built, the professional identity he'd cultivated for decades, suddenly seemed less essential than the connection he'd formed with this remarkable child and her mother. Yes, he said firmly. We would definitely still see each other. Later that evening, Reynolds called Rebecca. I need to discuss something important. Can we meet tomorrow? Is this about Harrington's ultimatum? She asked, surprising him with her awareness. How did you know? The executive floor has thin walls and Janet keeps me informed, Rebecca replied. She's quite protective of you. Reynolds smiled despite himself. Apparently I'm the last to know about the coup then. Not a coup yet, Rebecca corrected. Just an attempted one. She paused. Alexander, whatever you're planning, please don't make decisions based on protecting Emma and me. We've survived corporate politics before. It's not just about protecting you, he admitted. It's about deciding what matters more, the company I've built or the future I could build. The silence between them held possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Come for dinner tomorrow, Rebecca finally said. Emma's making her famous spaghetti. We can talk after she goes to bed. As Reynolds hung up, he realized that for the first time since losing Caroline and Lily, he was making decisions based not on past regrets, but on future hopes. Whatever happened with Meridian, something fundamental had shifted in his life's orientation. From looking back to looking forward, what he couldn't possibly know was that the following day would bring a revelation that would change everything. The manila envelope arrived by courier at 10:37 a.m. marked personal and confidential for Alexander Reynolds. Janet placed it on his desk with a curious glance, but asked no questions, one of the many reasons he valued her discretion. Inside, Reynolds found documents from Gerald Harrington's private files, copies of board meeting minutes from 18 years ago, personnel records and internal memos. A post-it note simply read, "You should know what you're really fighting against." A friend. As Reynolds read through the materials, his hands began to shake. The documents revealed a systematic policy implemented during Harrington's tenure as CEO, one that specifically targeted the hiring and retention of women of childbearing age, particularly those already with children. One memo from Harrington to the then HR director read, "While we cannot explicitly discriminate, we can implement performance metrics that naturally disadvantage those with family obligations. This ensures our workforce remains focused and unencumbered." Another document showed a list of female employees who had become pregnant while at Meridian, with notations tracking their eventual departures, all within 18 months of returning from maternity leave. The pattern was undeniable and deliberate. Most disturbing was a specific mention of Caroline Reynolds in a board presentation from 2 decades earlier. "Wife of our CFO, Alexander Reynolds, has requested part-time return from maternity leave. Recommend?" Denial, as it would set problematic precedent for executive spouses. Reynolds sat back, memories crashing over him like waves. Caroline's increasing frustration as she'd tried to return to work after Lily's birth. Her depression when firm after firm rejected her flexible work proposals. The arguments they'd had when he'd suggested she simply stay home with Lily, like other executives' wives. The final document in the package was a newspaper clipping about the accident that had killed Caroline and Lily, with a handwritten note in what appeared to be Harrington's writing. Tragic outcome. Ensure AR remains focused on work. Best distraction from grief. Reynolds' vision blurred with a combination of rage and grief. All these years he'd blamed himself for being too absorbed in building Meridian to support Caroline properly. He'd never considered that his mentor, Harrington, had actively blocked her professional return. When Rebecca called to confirm dinner plans, Reynolds' voice was strange enough to concern her. "What's happened?" she asked immediately. "I need to show you something," he replied. "Can you meet me at the office first? It's important." An hour later, Rebecca sat across from him, the damning documents spread between them on his desk. "This is," she began, then faltered. "Systematic discrimination," Reynolds finished. "Deliberately designed to push out working mothers while maintaining plausible deniability." Rebecca studied the documents carefully, her professional composure giving way to visible anger. "And Harrington was behind this? The same man who's trying to oust you for being too progressive? Not just behind it, he created it, implemented it, and apparently took pride in its effectiveness." Reynolds met her eyes. "Including with my wife, Caroline." Understanding dawned in Rebecca's expression. "That's why this has been so personal. For you? The Family Forward initiative isn't just about efficiency or even doing the right thing. It's about redemption," Reynolds admitted quietly. "Correcting a wrong I didn't even know existed until today." Rebecca reached across the desk, briefly touching his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. "Alexander, this changes everything. The board needs to see these documents." "Harrington has too many allies," Reynolds countered. "They'll claim these are old policies, no longer relevant. They'll minimize and rationalize." "Then we don't just show the board," Rebecca said, determination hardening her voice. "We show everyone." "What do you mean?" "Transparency," she explained. "Complete corporate transparency about past failures and current corrections. We publish a comprehensive report on Meridian's historical practices regarding working parents, acknowledge the failures, and detail the measurable improvements under the Family Forward initiative." Reynolds considered the implications. That would be unprecedented. "Exactly," Rebecca nodded. "No corporation willingly exposes its past mistakes this way. By doing so, we position Meridian not as perfect, but as courageously committed to progress. It's not just corporate policy, it becomes a movement." As they discussed strategy late into the afternoon, Reynolds found himself admiring not just Rebecca's professional insight, but her moral clarity. She approached the situation not as a victim of discrimination, but as a strategist determined to create systemic change. "There's one more thing," Reynolds said as they prepared to leave for dinner. "These documents don't just change how we approach the board meeting. They change my understanding of the past 17 years of my life." Rebecca studied his face. "What will you do with that understanding?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but for the first time since losing them, I feel like I might be on the path Caroline would have wanted." That evening at Rebecca's townhouse, Reynolds watched as Emma proudly served her spaghetti dinner, complete with garlic bread she'd helped prepare. The domestic scene struck him with an unexpected poignancy. This was what he'd missed all these years, what he'd walled himself off from after losing his family. After Emma went to bed, Rebecca poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Reynolds on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood park. "Tomorrow will be challenging," she said quietly. "Harrington won't go down without a fight." "I'm prepared for that," Reynolds replied. "What I'm less prepared for is what comes after." Rebecca turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" Reynolds chose his words carefully. "For 17 years I've defined myself by what I lost and by what I built to distract from that loss. Meridian became my identity because I had nothing else." He paused. "But these past few months, watching you with Emma, being included in your lives, I've started to remember there are other ways to measure success." "Alexander," Rebecca began cautiously, "whatever happens with Meridian, you've created real change. That will help countless families. That matters." "It does," he agreed. "But I'm beginning to think that what matters more is being present for the people in front of you, not just building systems that might help anonymous families in the future." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but increasingly clear. "We should focus on tomorrow's battle first," Rebecca finally said, though her eyes held questions about possibilities beyond the corporate conflict. Reynolds nodded, respecting her careful boundaries. "You're right, one transformation at a time." As he prepared to leave, Emma appeared in the hallway in her pajamas, ostensibly for a glass of water but clearly curious about the adult conversation. "Mr. Reynolds," she said with the directness only children truly master, "are you going to be okay? You look worried." Reynolds knelt to her level. "I am a little worried about a meeting tomorrow, but having you and your mom on my side makes me much braver." Emma considered this seriously before declaring, "Mum says that when you're worried about something big, you should remember that most things look different in the morning." The simple wisdom made Reynolds smile. "Your mum is very smart." "I know," Emma agreed confidently. Then with childlike intuition, she added, "She likes you too, you know. She smiles more when you're here." As Rebecca gently shooed her daughter back to bed with an embarrassed glance at Reynolds, he realized that whatever happened at tomorrow's board meeting, the most significant transformation had already occurred, not in corporate policy, but in his own heart. The man who would walk into Meridian Enterprises the next morning was fundamentally different from the isolated, driven executive who had encountered a determined 7-year-old in his lobby just a few months earlier. He just hoped that difference would be enough to win the coming battle. The Meridian Enterprises boardroom fell silent as Alexander Reynolds concluded his presentation. The evidence of Harrington's discriminatory policies lay before each board member, decades of systematic exclusion methodically documented and impossible to deny. "For 17 years, Reynolds said, his voice steady but charged with emotion, "I believed I had failed my wife Caroline by being too focused on building this company. Today I learned that the real failure was institutional, a deliberate policy, designed by Mr. Harrington to eliminate working mothers from our workforce." Harrington's face had grown increasingly ashen as Reynolds revealed document after document. "These are historical practices," he protested weakly. "Times were different. Were they?" Rebecca interrupted, standing beside Reynolds at the head of the table. "Or did you simply make sure they stayed the same?" She distributed additional reports showing the Family Forward Initiative's remarkable success metrics. "The evidence shows that supporting working parents doesn't diminish productivity, it enhances it." James Whitfield cleared his throat. "I move that we formally adopt the Family Forward Initiative as permanent company policy, and that we expand it across all Meridian offices nationwide." "I second," said Martina Chen, a usually quiet board member who had been watching the proceedings, with growing resolve. And I further move that Gerald Harrington be removed from the board effective immediately. Harrington surged to his feet. This is preposterous. I built this company. On exclusion and prejudice, Reynolds finished for him. Times have changed, Gerald. Meridian has changed. The vote was decisive, 11-3 in favor of removing Harrington and permanently implementing the initiative. As security escorted the former CEO from the building, Reynolds felt a weight lifting, not just the immediate threat to his position, but a deeper burden he'd carried since losing Caroline and Lily. Later that afternoon, as the news of Meridian's groundbreaking new policies hit the financial press, Reynolds found himself alone in his office, staring at the photograph of Caroline and Lily. For the first time in 17 years, he spoke to them without guilt clouding his words. "I think you would have approved," he said softly. "It took me far too long, but maybe some good has come from losing you after all." A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. Rebecca stood in the doorway, Emma beside her. "We brought celebration cupcakes," Emma announced, holding up a box from the bakery down the street. "Mom says you won the big fight." Reynolds smiled. "We did. Together." As Emma arranged cupcakes on his conference table with solemn concentration, Rebecca joined Reynolds by the window. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Professionally? We implement the initiative nationwide, then industry-wide. I've already had calls from 3 competing firms asking for consultation." He turned to face her fully. "Personally, that's a more complicated question." Rebecca's eyes held his. "Is it?" Reynolds took a deep breath. "For 17 years I've lived in the past, building Meridian as a monument to what I'd lost rather than as a foundation for something new." He glanced at Emma, now carefully dividing napkins. "You and Emma reminded me that life continues, that there can be second chances if we're brave enough to take them." "Are you?" Rebecca asked softly. "Brave enough?" In answer, Reynolds reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wrapped package. This was Caroline's. She would have wanted someone like you to have it, someone who fights for the same things she believed in. Rebecca unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a compass. She always said a woman needed her own direction, not one set by others, Reynolds explained. It seems fitting now. As Rebecca touched the bracelet with gentle fingers, Emma bounded over. "Are you guys having a serious talk? Your faces look serious." Reynolds knelt to her level. "Actually, I was wondering if you and your mum might like to help me with a new project." Emma's eyes brightened. "Like the kid space we designed?" "Even bigger," Reynolds smiled. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation, one that helps companies create better workplaces for families. We'd need a chief testing officer to make sure our ideas actually work for kids." "I could do that," Emma exclaimed. "I thought you might." Reynolds agreed, looking up at Rebecca. "And we'd need a brilliant executive director who understands both corporate structure and family needs." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You're serious about this?" "Completely," Reynolds confirmed. "The Reynolds Family Foundation focused on transforming workplace culture nationwide." "Reynolds Family Foundation," Emma repeated thoughtfully. "Does that mean we'd be part of your family?" The innocent question hung in the air, laden with meaning beyond a 7-year-old's understanding. Rebecca blushed. "Emma, that's not—" "Not yet," Reynolds interrupted gently, surprising himself with the words. "But families come together in many different ways over time." 1 year later to the day, the Reynolds Family Foundation celebrated its official launch in the same lobby where Emma had first approached the reception desk with her mother's portfolio. Now, hundreds of business leaders gathered to learn about implementing family-forward policies in their own companies. Alexander Reynolds stood at the podium, Rebecca beside him as executive director, and Emma proudly passing out program brochures to attendees. "One unexpected visitor changed everything," Reynolds told the crowd. "A 7-year-old girl taught a room full of executives what true courage looks like." He smiled at Emma, now standing between him and Rebecca. "She reminded us that family isn't a liability in the workplace. It's our greatest asset and our ultimate purpose." As applause filled the atrium, Reynolds took Rebecca's hand, the silver compass bracelet catching the light as their fingers intertwined. The gold band on her left hand, a recent addition, matched the one on his. "Ready for this new adventure?" he asked quietly. Rebecca smiled, leaning into his shoulder as Emma wrapped her arms around them both. "We've been ready since the day she walked into your lobby. Sometimes the most important meetings of our lives come disguised as interruptions. Sometimes our greatest opportunities arrive in unexpected packages. And sometimes, just sometimes, a child's simple courage can heal wounds we thought would last forever."